Hello, and welcome to TrekPrime, episode 45. Wait a minute, I think I'm on the wrong podcast. Oh, I think I get the Kelvin universe Jeff over here. I'm sorry. Or are you wearing the wrong outfit? Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess Jeff over here has decided to get his stuff from a parallel reality tonight. And that's kind of what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing an element in Star Trek that we've kind of hinted at that is going to be a part of Star Trek in a big way. You know, in the past, I'd say at this point about 18, 19, 20 years. Yeah. And that's been the element of time travel. You know, if you read any Star Trek parody, time travel is often thought of as a bit of a punchline. It's kind of an easy device to use in the show. And, you know, it has been used a lot in recent years, but we're actually going to go back to the original run of Star Trek from 1966 up until 2005-ish, but focus on TOS through Voyager. Because there's some time travel moments that are actually interesting, that advance characters, that, again, contain lessons, and actually some fun along the way. So I'm just going to run down. And one criterion I decided with time travel to talk about today is that I didn't want non-consequential time travel stories. So I don't know if the Q stuff counts. I mean, like Tapestry or All Good Things.
Yeah.
You know, because those, like, would you say those may be things that are more Q-derived or possibly outside of real time?
Well, that's the thing with Q is you don't know, I mean...
Because he can kind of make time whatever he wants it to be.
Yeah, I mean, he can create worlds, too. Remember, he created that one there where Riker and Worf, go, drop your weapons! You know,
drop your weapons!
Yeah. You know, he made that whole world.
Yeah, with those aliens that had the muskets that were actually laser guns or whatever.
Yeah, the Civil War soldier aliens here.
Yeah.
So he's got that ability to do...
So he's omnipotent. He can do anything he wants. So, yeah. You know what? Now that I think about it, he could be like that thing we talked about with Xena.
Yeah.
He could be the Wizard did it, basically, of Star Trek. Like, well, you know, Discovery, it looks weird. JJ universe. Q did it.
Yeah, Q did it.
He snapped his fingers and made these other universes. So, yeah, I mean, those timelines, I don't really count those as time travel as much as Q travel. That's just, I don't know. I mean, they're their own kind of things. He can kind of make time whenever he wants and just, he's like putting it together in his hand or whatever he has.
Maybe Q's son is just screwing around with the timeline or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, with Q, I don't know. I mean, the Q time travel stories I don't include in this, but time travel is organic in the Star Trek universe, and preferably the ones that have specific consequences to the timeline or to characters.
Yeah.
So we're going to start out with TOS here, and well, here's the thing. There is a time travel story very early on in TOS, but it's only a consequence to another thing. It's that one in Naked Time where they have to do a cold restart of the engines, and they end up going back in time and just like, oh, we can do this now. You know,
yeah. It was sort of like, you know, they never knew they could do that before.
Right, it wasn't a consequential time travel. They just, and then Spock's like, we can go anywhere we want. Like, okay. Yeah. So, but the first real time travel episode, I believe, was an accident, a complete accident, and that was Tomorrow Is Yesterday.
That's right.
And at first, you know, when I saw that episode when I was younger, I didn't know I was watching Star Trek. Because, you know, they started out in like this contemporary
I think they're watching something else, like a documentary about the Air Force or something.
Right, or like maybe like a military show at that time or something. And then you see the pilot going up in a plane. It's a regular plane going up. And then you see the Enterprise flying. Like, oh, okay. And of course, back then it was the like little, right? That one, yeah, the little weird floaty Connie, you know. I mean, I'll use my little Eagle Moss Connie to demonstrate. You know, the little Enterprise going, you know, the little dancing Enterprise, you want to call it. Anyway, so
wasn't that like the first time you actually see the Enterprise inside an atmosphere?
Right, because usually you see like stock footage of it in space or whatever, but this is the first time you see it kind of flying around.
Yeah, they're actually inside the space.
And some of the views are actually not bad. Like when you see Captain Christopher coming behind the Enterprise, you see a good back view of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now they really did a good job in the remaster, making it look really nice. But, you know, in the original one, the back view of the Enterprise is actually not one of the better views they had of it, because usually they use that stock footage over and over
Yeah.
Like you'd see the regular Enterprise, you'd see the cage one flying away or something, or the Windowman is gone before one. They kept reusing that footage, remember?
Yep.
They'd have like the Enterprise, the new one, and then they'd have the old footage going away or something.
Yeah.
But that one you had to see the back of the Enterprise as it was at that time. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, so they beam this guy up because their tracking is breaking the little pathetic plane apart. Well, pathetic to them. So, basically to show you how super powerful this Connie was. It could be hit with 90 torpedo equivalents. Well, many such, apparently, like 3 times that. So
the tractor beam at the lowest level would destroy an aircraft.
yeah. So what would the Enterprise D have done to it? Sheesh. So this ship is like, whoop. So they beam this guy on board, and of course he's kind of skeptical of he's time travel. And there's that weird component where they had their computer refitted at Signet, and it kept calling everybody dear.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like there was a whole other story that should have been told before that one,
I would have loved to have seen that Signet 14 refit where they're saying, oh yeah, let's make the computer really solicitous,
Yeah.
Let's make it come on and woo the guys. I can kind of see the female technicians that kind of trolling the Enterprise crew. Let's make it call everybody dear, Like maybe let's make this the Dorothy Parker computer.
Yeah.
I
mean, the animated series, didn't he also do the same thing with that computer where when they went into that cloud and it gave it a personality when it came out?
Yeah, play jokes on everybody.
Yeah, it was
the infamous Kirk is a jerk sign.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that Q did that with in Voyager 2. Remember, Jimmy orders coffee. She goes, "Make it yourself." So So these computers are very malleable. You can, like any computer, you can reprogram them and do anything you want, really. So, anyway, so that's a little side story, kind of to add some humor to this, because the base of the story is that they're afraid they can't return this guy because they don't want him revealing information about their time, because Spock doesn't want history changed.
Yeah.
And he knows how this is the 1960s and how paranoid people are, which was true. Would you want a guy from the Cold War taking 23rd century information back?
Yeah.
Bad idea, especially a military guy.
Yeah.
Bad idea. So, anyway, so yeah, and there's an interesting mechanic at the end of this episode. Well, 2 of them. This guy is not that significant at the time, but his son is going to go to Saturn at some point.
Yes.
I wish we could hear more about the Saturn probe. I don't know when that happened, but it was at some point this guy's son, Sean Jeffrey Christopher, is supposed to go to Saturn.
Yeah.
So I don't know when they had a Saturn probe, but I guess that was one of the things. I don't know if he was on a warp-capable ship or what, but it's weird. So anyway,
it's one of those elements that I think we mentioned last week about how in the 60s there was so much high hope for the 90s that we would be doing colonies on the moon, and remember how they used to talk about how things would be by now. We'd be traveling in the solar system and putting colonies out in
they don't take into account, and this could go with time travel. They don't take into account, lousy political leaders screwing up the economy and making space travel obsolete. They kind of go with what's happening.
That's right.
You got to wonder if things had kind of happened the way Kennedy had it. That might have happened.
It could have.
If we hadn't had Nixon. Anyway, so that guy did more than Watergate. He really screwed up the space program. Let's just talk turkey. Yeah. Really screwed it up. I'm just saying on the levels. Puertas hasn't really recovered, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Really, if that's a whole other story. But yeah, in the case where time travel would have been interesting to see that alternate timeline where the Apollo program was just the beginning of something.
That's right.
Hey, might have solved environmental problems on Earth finding space stuff.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's all these interesting ideas. We could have quantum realities floating all over the place out there we don't even know about,
Yeah.
So, anyway, so they, in the end of this episode, I always found it interesting. They went back in time just a little bit. And, when I say go back in time, they slingshot it around the sun doing that.
Yeah.
So, of course, in the remaster, and of course, they're on the ship shaking around while the Enterprise is dancing. So,
yeah, Kirk more than the others. He's always got to be more dramatic than all the other people.
He's not season 3 dramatic, but he's, still Shatner dramatic.
He likes to really sell it,
Yeah, so that's Shatner. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, so at the end of that, okay, so they slingshot around the sun, which they do really nice in the remaster, by the way. They do a really good job.
I know. They actually show it going around the sun.
It's kind of cool to see TOS done, TOS correctly. Thank you. in that kind of newer style.
Yeah.
You know, which they could still be doing now, but only your uniform's out of canon tonight, so let's not go there. Anyway, so basically the thing is with the end of that is that they go back and there's a guy who they beam up from the base who get the chicken soup guy, remember?
Yeah, he was a guard.
And he has to wait there while they figure out what to do, and they make him chicken soup with that thing, and it's not cubes, it's actual soup, and he's like, okay, this is weird. So then they beam him back into himself, and they beam Captain Christopher back into himself in the plane.
I never understood how that was supposed to
Yeah, and when they do that, they don't remember anything that happened.
Yeah.
The whole vibe seems to be nothing happened because it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, but what are they actually beaming back? I mean, if there's,
Actually, nothing. They beamed the character back into themselves before it happened, so nothing happened.
Yeah, I never understood that.
I guess time stuff. I don't.
Yeah. I mean,
we'll get into some of that time stuff in another series later.
I would think they were trying to bring them back to the moment they left, basically.
Right, that was the idea. So whatever happened there never happened. So they just beamed their physical bodies back into their older physical bodies before things happened. Am I getting a good line there? Because that was a little weird, that way they transported them back in like that.
Yeah, I mean, because the guard didn't seem like it was in the right sequence, because he actually went into the room first, and then he left. Yeah,
they kind of beamed into that. They kind of beamed him into that back there in like almost a pointless film shot, like before it ever happened.
That's right.
Because he went into that room, and then he saw them, and Sulu in there, and then they beamed him up.
Yeah.
But they got him before he went in there, so I guess whatever, maybe a second off. I mean, I don't know. But the point is that I guess they didn't remember anything that happened. I think that's what happened.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, but it's just a very weird theory that they used to correct the timeline.
Well, but the thing about that, though, is that, the only logic I can really maintain to them beaming them back into their bodies like that was that they kind of created a paradox with that. Like, here's another way they could have done it. They could have just went back in time and had them disappear because it never happened.
Yeah.
But I guess either way, there's going to be some messed up stuff. So it's probably better they beam them back. So it's like, well, we beamed them back into themselves, but it never happened, so nothing happened.
Yeah.
Because you look up, the Enterprise wasn't there, so.
Yeah.
So whatever, it never happened. That whole thing never happened, basically. But it happened to the Enterprise crew.
Yeah. They still remember it. Yeah.
And possibly that computer calling everybody dear probably recorded everything, so. Now, I mean, I know they didn't record things as accurately as the Telosians did in Menagerie. That's another story, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they probably recorded some of it. I mean, they did pretty good log recordings of that thing with Ben Finney, remember?
Yeah.
So they can do some things. They just can't record imagery, apparently, the way Telosians can.
That's right.
So anyway, on to the next episode after that. And this is an episode that, actually, I was going to do a whole thing on it because this is a whole other rabbit hole regarding its writing. I think you know what I'm getting to now.
Yeah.
On the Edge of Forever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep Harlan Ellison out of this as much as possible. he tended to dominate this story.
I can hear him. He's out there listening.
Yeah, he's like, tell my story. No disrespect to the dead, but believe me, I'm not going to get in front of here and tell the story like that. It's not going to be that way. So
yeah.
And I'm not going to put on a giant smoke machine either. So
smoke machine.
Because he was always on those shows where everybody smokes. So anyway, so here's the thing. This is a very consequential story, and I'm just talking about the way they did it. Sorry, Harlan. Sorry. The way they did it, Bones accidentally injects himself because the ship is passing through ripples of time. I guess that Guardian of Forever is sending out time waves all over the place if you get nearby.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, they and by the way, I didn't mention the alternative factor because that's more of an alternate universe story, and
that's really not time travel. It's just
that's really some kind of unusual multiverse theory I'm still trying to figure out anyway. But the point is that kind of their first version of it, but it didn't quite come together as well as another one. But anyway, we can do alternate universe stories another time because there are plenty of alternate universe stories.
Yeah. Actually,
that could kind of fit into what's going on now. But anyway, I mean, that's another trope they're overusing. But anyway, the thing is that. So yeah, they encounter this Guardian of Forever, and for some reason Spock is so captivated he forgets to turn on his tricorder and record historical research.
Yeah.
He says, "I'm a fool," which you never hear Spock say.
Yeah.
I mean, he's sitting there so wowed by this that he's not turning on. Maybe it got his human side emotionally somehow.
Well, maybe he was just so worried about McCoy that, it just never dawned on him to actually
worried. Isn't worried illogical? Oh, right, half human.
He's got that half human part of him that can't,
Not worried about McCoy, and also maybe just wowed by this Guardian of Forever and fascinated by it.
Yeah, this whole area. I mean, it's like an old city that's all crumbled and deteriorated.
It'll be weird to see a story where they showed the origin. I'm sure there's been fan series about Guardian of Forever and books and stuff, because obviously there was, and this is just a theory. Don't take this to any heart. Do you think that might have been some kind of early version of the Iconian Gateway?
Hey, I never thought of that, but you're probably right. Maybe that was something that
like an earlier variation of it.
Yeah, predated what they ended up using.
It was very much advancing, but that Iconian Gateway's come up a lot in Star Trek over the years. Deep Space Nine.
But it seemed to me like the Guardian was like its own life form in a way. I mean,
it talked very much about like it being its own thing. So who knows? I mean, that might have been a life form that was able to exist outside our dimension.
Yeah, because time. Remember when they went back and time changed? They weren't changed on the planet. They were still there, so they were protected by something that Guardian.
Right. That planet was living outside of time.
That's right.
So anyway, you kind of explained. Bones went back in time and changed things, and when they came back, there was no Federation. So when they went back in time, they were in the 30s, and of course they met up. I mean, we all know this. They met up with Joan Collins. I'm sorry, Edith Keeler.
Yep.
And she's a woman who's a pacifist, has a gifted insight into the future. Kirk, for once, genuinely falls in love. He's not just kissing a woman; he is genuinely falling in love, which is kind of nice. The only weird thing about it is that he wants to keep her alive, but Spock's finding out through his very oddly jury-rigged tricorder with stone knives and bearskins and oscillators, and it looks like a 1930 science experiment when he's done with it. You see these little tubes and everything.
I know what Craig had. The whole room was full of.
Okay, I got it. Maybe that was the time Spock invented the detector circuit. He invented it in the 1930s and then bought it back.
Yeah, he had quite a few circuits. He had to yank out of the back of that tricorder when that started to blow.
Yeah,
up.
he was yanking wires and all kinds of other stuff out of that. So that was a big circuit. I mean, they could have inserted that in there, saying that, well, I've got the future on the detector circuit. That would have been a good place for that. The TOS dialogue. But anyway, so yeah, he finds out basically that she's going to negotiate peace talks, which will allow the Nazis to take over. And basically they did that in Enterprise. Well, I'll get to that a little later. So yeah, so the Nazis took over and the future changed and Starfleet didn't happen. So basically, one woman he actually loves, he has to let her die. So it's kind of a cathartic story in the end, where they save their timeline, but Kirk has to make a sacrifice. So very good time travel story. Except I would say that we need to stop using that quarterzine. That seems like it might be a problem.
Yeah. If
it makes you kind of psychotic. So, I mean, Bones used the whole hyperspray. He thought everybody was trying to kill him. So, yeah. I know that's a substitute for Harlan. I'm sorry. I know that's supposed to be there, but we're not talking about this boasters tonight. We're talking about what was.
Yeah, what is. What
so, yeah, I mean, we can go into the Harlan Ellison story some other time. That's a whole podcast of its own.
Yeah, I know.
So, we've actually discussed it a lot after our shows. But anyway, so, okay. So that's, I think we're at the end of season 1 here. Let's go into season 2 to a time travel story that actually is a backdoor pilot, Assignment Earth.
Yes, yeah.
With Robert Lansing, is that his name?
Yeah.
The late Robert Lansing, and a very young Terry Garr. And basically it's like a Bond in like Flint-ish setup.
Yeah, it was.
Sort of.
It was funny because, I would think at the time they would have wanted.
Yeah, because that was big.
That was Secret Agent down to earth, right? Because everybody was kind of, the space stuff wasn't really that popular, but this was sort of like down to earth kind of adventures, science fiction adventures that they would have had. So I'm surprised it didn't pick it up.
Yeah. Assignment Earth would have been great because you figure you have this kind of spy thing, but because it's made, Gene Roddenberry would have been making it, he could insert social commentary happening right now.
That's probably maybe why they didn't want that on it.
Yeah, because they had that weird censorship where the Doors couldn't go on at television and say the word higher. Oh my gosh, higher can make kids use drugs.
They actually had to say the word, Vietnam, and they would have been no.
Like, oh my gosh, people are going to protest the war if they hear the word Vietnam. It's just these weird censorship things.
Yeah.
But it's too bad because that could have been great internal commentary.
Yeah.
But also there's another thing about it, and I'm wondering if this factored into it. If you look at the things that he has and the way he acts, basically the Gary Seven character is Doctor Who. Basically, he's got a sonic screwdriver, right?
But the thing of it is, though, is he's not really trying to travel through time. He's trying to fix it as it goes.
I know. I'm just saying that basically his whole vibe is Doctor Who. He's got a sonic screwdriver that can do a lot of strange things. He's got a TARDIS, more or less.
Yeah.
And he's got a female assistant.
Yep.
He's a man of mystery. We don't really know who he is. He just calls himself Gary Seven, like he's some kind of agent.
Or another alien.
He's a human race on another planet in the future.
Yeah.
Or at that time, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
And, he has this capability of affecting space and time. So basically, he's like a sanitized, not sanitized, but kind of changed around a little bit American version of Doctor Who in a lot of ways. Mixed with a little Bond, mixed with a little Flint, whatever. Kind of a secret agent thing. But the whole vibe of it is basically he's there to stop nuclear war.
Yeah.
But he can't tell anybody about it.
I think that if they'd have had a different actor instead of, I'm not saying Robert Lansing isn't a good actor. He is a good actor. I've seen him in a lot of things. But I think what would have sold that would have been somebody a little bit more energetic, more action-oriented,
Yeah, you think maybe somebody who's more of a dashing romantic figure than a super serious, clever scientist type guy?
Yeah, because his approach to it was too, I think it was too cerebral in a way. Like he,
there we go again with something being too cerebral, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, because to play off of the girl, they should have had somebody
like a regular girl at that time.
Yeah, they should have had somebody a little bit younger, and somebody that's a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe Gary Seven should have been just a little hipper seeming.
Yeah,
a little more mod.
Yeah, more like sort of like Captain Kirk of the Doctor Who, something like that.
Yeah, like I said, well, that's why I mentioned Doctor Who was kind of mod at times. You could have him be kind of a hip alien.
Yeah.
But he seemed like you're very aware he was doing something important. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
He wasn't a sort of guy who was very casual.
Yeah.
He seemed like you knew he was kind of up to something. He kind of seemed like he was very important.
Yeah.
And if you're a spy, you want to act very casual and like, there's no big deal, but I'm controlling this whole joint. And he kind of had this attitude that, well, that I'm important.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the whole point, that people would kind of get fooled by his brash confidence, and you wouldn't, I don't know. But, I mean, the Batgirl pilot wasn't picked up, but it was an interesting episode. Except they left off that little weird line that, Mr. Seven and Mrs. Lincoln are going to have some adventures indeed, and that's it.
Yeah.
They could have done books on that or movies, but they didn't. They just
like I said, it was a great concept. They could have done something with it, but it just didn't fly, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was a backdoor pilot. I think one of the only backdoor pilots Star Trek actually had in that time.
That's right.
Yeah. At least the only one I know about. So, okay, we're out of TOS now. So there are some time travel in movies, but we've covered the movies. We covered Star Trek 4. So I'm going to go to the animated series, which you also kind of covered this, but I want to add some other things to this. Yesteryear. We bring back the Guardian of Forever in this one.
That's right.
Spock basically goes back in time and causes his own death. Yet when he comes back, of course, he comes back because he's on that planet and he's protected, but all of a sudden he's replaced by an Andorian.
Yeah.
So he's witnessing his non-existence.
Yeah.
And I do want to note that he didn't come back and find the Kirk was Chris Pine. He didn't find the ship had changed into some sort of thing that could fly underwater. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
He came back and found his same Enterprise, his same crew, except an Andorian where he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So apparently in that time, his death was not totally consequential.
I forget now, what originally did Kirk and Spock use the time portal for to leave?
They were in Orion during the dawn of its civilization.
Oh, okay.
They were watching the Orion civilization come to fruition, a race we didn't know much about, but they were witnessing the Orion race developing.
So actually, when they came back, it wasn't anything they did. It was something Spock was supposed to do. It was like, what did you call it?
Predestination paradox.
Yeah. So he actually had to go back and do what happened before to fill in the gap to go back into the future. So he was meant to go back. So they didn't do anything.
No, Spock just fulfilled his destiny, you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it me, or was Star Trek becoming a little like the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that place where you had to kind of alter time to, I don't know.
I think in the 70s, they were kind of tiptoeing around that a little bit in the comic books. And
well, yeah, they had Doctor Who again at that point. They also had a British show called The Tomorrow People. Remember that?
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
Where that was kind of, they had time tunnel in the States, so they had those kind of predestination kind of things that were happening in sci-fi in the 70s and late 60s. So, okay, so that we're up to TNG now. When I did TNG, I didn't realize how much time travel there was, and some odd time travel too.
Hmm.
And the first one I'm going to mention, and this is an episode I don't go back to often. I don't hate it because it's a first season episode, but the time travel in this is really kind of it's the A story of it, but people think about the B story, and that's We'll Always Have Paris.
Oh, okay,
Now,
yeah.
see, the B story is Picard meeting up with Michelle Phillips, who he basically stood up, but that's the B story. The A story is that time is all screwed up. If you remember, Picard is fencing with this guy, and they go back, and then they restart it.
Yeah, it's like everything keeps rewinding.
It's like the Enterprise is caught in a giant rewinder, and everything's kind of going back in time, and they're what's going on. And apparently this woman that Picard was married to, this Dr. Mannheim, who was doing experiments in time, which was causing the whole galaxy to basically glitch.
Yeah.
And it was a big consequential thing. But and he's sitting there in sickbay, kind of aphagic and talking incoherently. But the whole basis of that story is a way to get Picard with his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
So even though her husband is in some temporal delirium. And in the end, he comes out of it because Data goes into that other dimension, and there's like 5 of them, remember?
Yeah.
Including one who can use... including one that could... Remember, one of them could use contractions because the one responded, "It's me!
It's me!"
So one of them could use contractions. So in another parallel reality, Data could use contractions. I found that interesting.
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake, but it's like, which one? It's me!
Yeah, and they all reintegrated back into themselves, and they dropped.
In some universe, there may be a Data that survived and used contractions. So yeah.
He created his daughter, and she could use contractions.
Yeah, well, remember that thing? Wasn't there a scene in that where Riker and Picard come off the turbo lift and they're looking at themselves?
Yeah.
So in that movie, the actual time is all screwed up.
Yeah,
time is a disaster.
It's like the weirdest thing, as at that time, that kind of time travel wasn't done before. I mean, we've seen people going back and coming forward, but we never seen people running into each other like seconds before or after.
And that's why I'm glad that Star Trek time travel rules don't operate by Back to the Future rules.
Yeah.
Because if that had happened, Doc Brown said that an encounter like that could unravel the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe, or in a best-case scenario, only our own galaxy. So we're very happy that didn't happen. Of course, he may have been overdressing things severely, but because, obviously in that movie, old Jennifer and young Jennifer just pass out.
Yeah.
Which he didn't mention. They could simply pass out or destroy the entire universe. So there's big gaps in consequence. So in this universe, you could just look at each other and say, oh, hi, Riker. Hi, Picard. Bye. So it's just interesting how they didn't destroy the whole fabric of time. Of course, Q's there probably kind of protecting things.
Yeah, Q did it.
Yeah, there's that Q did it. So that's always an interesting time travel story. And, when I went back and watched that, I just thought of that, that's the Picard Stands Up a Woman episode. But it isn't. The time travel thing is actually the A story.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a weird one because the ship is all screwed up. Things are happening backwards and everything's all kind of messed up. And I just wonder why we always think about that as being the B story of Picard and his ex, when that's actually not the main story. The main story is this time thing.
Yeah.
So
when my mother watched it, in her mind, the A story was Picard and his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, I think we all had that because that was the way it was advertised. They said Michelle Phillips is going to be in it, and Picard's, who at this point has had no love life.
Yeah.
As one, and ruined it. But the main story is this time thing, which when you look back at it, that's what I have now, and it's a weird thing. I mean, they could have expanded off the Mannheim experiments a lot.
Yeah.
Because if this guy had created something that could actually affect the way time works in the universe, that could be interesting, problematic, and bring up some questions. So that could have kind of been its own little spin-off. Like you've seen The Next Generation now, the Mannheim effect. I don't know if we can screw up time in this universe. And
and just to take that experiment into consideration about how Next Generation, kind of starts to look retro. It's like, well, look at what they were working on. Look what the scientists were working on at the time. They're trying to control time, or in some way. I mean, how.
Yeah, that's not retro. They're trying to control time, and that's kind of still theoretical now.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, that's so advanced an idea or concept. I mean, it's, and people, I'm just shocked at people when they watch Next Generation. They say, oh, it's old. It looks old.
Well, like I said, I know kids who are younger than me who think the effects in Twister are corny. Yeah. And I can say, what do you think sold that movie when it came out?
Yeah.
It sure wasn't Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. It was that tornado.
Tornado.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against them. I'm just saying it was the tornado that sold it. I mean, if you look on the back on the little rating, and it'll say rated PG for very graphic description of very bad weather.
Yeah.
So that movie, the whole thing is those very big and effective and realistic and scary tornadoes that are now considered old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Not old-fashioned to me, though.
Yeah.
They still impact on me. And when I see the next generation, there's a reason why they didn't alter the effects of that. That holds up really well, I think.
It does. I think it does. Yeah.
I mean, but there's brattiness of people who just think, well, it's my dad's generation, so I had to be old, I mean, there are some things that legitimately look old and messed up, and we knew it was messed up at the time. But there are just some things that just people, they're kind of used to newer things, but things age,
Yeah.
But like I said, for what they were doing with model work, it stands up very well.
Yeah, it does.
As a matter of fact, I hear some kids think that, oh, well, the CGI in TNG was so old-fashioned. That isn't CGI you're seeing.
Yeah.
That's model work.
Yeah.
What's model work? Talk to your parents.
Wow. They have
But, I mean, some people think that's CGI in there. It's like, most of that isn't CGI at all. There's some, but not a lot.
Yeah, it's actually more animated, like the phasers and all that. They call it animation.
Right, but I mean, some people think that the Enterprise was CGI in that. I mean, no, that was a model.
Yeah, that was just a model.
The crystalline entity was CGI, but CGI was still kind of primitive then.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting episode to kind of say to the natures, yeah, TNG is an old-fashioned. They're experimenting with rippling time in the universe. That's not retro. That's futurism, So the next episode is another odd one that kind of, I'm going to bring Q back into this, but it's speculative because we don't know, but there's been speculation about this. And it's a very internal time travel story because it affects an issue that only happens a few hours in the Enterprise's future, but it could have destroyed the ship, time squared.
Oh, yeah.
They meet up with a shuttle that has another Picard in it, and he's kind of a corpse almost. And it really sets...
Theory, wasn't it? How that started?
Yeah, because if he finds another Picard, Pulaski is like, Captain, you better get down here. So he finds himself, Picard's creeped out, doesn't want to deal with him.
Yeah.
And when Picard wakes up, the other Picard, he's like not really there. It's like he's not able to perceive what's going on around him.
Yeah, the theory with that was he would only get better once he was actually connected back to the time.
Right, so that was like a whole other time thing because, so there was they looked through the logs of it and they found out that he witnessed the destruction of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And they found this image of this other Riker presumably standing there and the Enterprise going into this vortex.
You're talking about Twister, but that's kind of what the Enterprise fell into, was a tornado in space. And
which actually doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, I know. But I was thinking, you know what? Maybe Q made that damn thing.
That's what I was going to say with the Q. People have often said that was a Q trick.
Yeah.
The Q made that to kind of...
It smelled of Q. I mean, it seemed like something he was doing.
You know how Q would just kind of snap his fingers and make anomalies appear out of nowhere?
Well, he always had this thing with Picard. He always liked to torture him a little bit.
It was kind of like you testing on a little mole or something.
Yeah.
Because remember, for Q, we're all kind of ants.
I mean, even Data said it, that he was his pet. Remember in that?
I kind of envision Q sitting in some galactic stateroom with this big fish tank and the Enterprise D's floating around and he's sitting there with a little pin playing with it. And,
Let's see what happens if I do this,
Like, let's just put this little fake anomaly in here and do that. I kind of see that's where his thing is. Like, the Enterprise D's a little thing in a fish tank with him.
He's trying to teach him something through that. I don't know.
I'm just thinking that's how it would look to us.
Yeah.
Like, he's just up there like, this is all just play to him.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a little starship in the ant farm. I'm just gonna go in there and play with the card. And
by the time that episode aired, I mean, there was still a lot of chatter about Q.
Because he appeared, I think, twice by then.
Yeah, and at least I don't know if he came on.
I don't know if did they have Q Who yet at that point?
It was either before or after that episode where they did the one with the Borg, so that would have been the third time you'd have
seen. That was Q Who. Yeah.
Q Who, yeah. So there was already talk that Q was going to come back in an episode of that season, and I think everybody was assuming that was going to be Q's entrance into that, where he had created some kind of.
I know they had encountered a Farpoint and hiding Q by then, in the first season.
Right.
But so yeah, so there was a lot of again that wizard did it aspect of Q, Q did it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that vortex, and then it's weird. By the time they get near the event, there's literally two Picards.
Yeah.
There are two identical Picards, except one has knowledge, the other doesn't.
Yeah.
but they're built the same character. But in the beginning, the other Picard is like almost like a reanimated Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
Like a half their corpse. And Stewart, it's screwing. I mean, in Picard, it's screwing. It's like there's nothing about him I find familiar. And then Troy saying that Picard doesn't like to doubt himself, and this Picard represents doubt and uncertainty, and it ends up being a psychological time travel story about Picard. These time travel stories in TNG were really interesting, weren't they? Now that I'm thinking about them.
Yeah.
They really delved into these character things,
Yeah, because at that episode, it gave you a more insight of Picard himself.
Right, because he doesn't like the idea of, again, like Kirk, only in less overt way, he kind of doesn't like to be out of control.
Yeah.
And we actually heard his brother say, you don't like to be out of control. And, in this one, it's like he's not in control of his own destiny at all. His other self has already been through something.
Yeah.
And it's up to him to turn the events around so it doesn't happen. But it doesn't happen, so the other shuttle and the other Picard disappear, if I remember.
Yeah.
Because, like with Captain Christopher, nothing happens, so they... Yeah.
Yeah.
So that whole thing was kind of like they basically alter their own destiny. Now we're going to get to an episode that had serious consequences for the Star Trek canon. Yesterday's Enterprise. Now, obviously, if you understand that, the Enterprise C comes through, and when it does, this very alternate reality gets created where we're on the warship Enterprise, and Tasha Yar is still alive. Obviously, Worf is not there. And the Federation have been war with the Klingons for something like 25, 30 years and are near the end of collapse. But for some reason, since we don't know about what's going to happen with her yet, Guinan is partially impervious to the events.
Yeah, she's kind of aware that something's changed.
I mean, she's apparently changed with it, but she acts like she kind of noticed the change.
Yeah.
Because she was talking to Geordi in the beginning. Oh, was it Worf? Oh, it was Worf, because that's one of my favorite scenes of Star Trek, where she gets him to try prune juice.
Prune juice, yeah.
And he says, "This is a warrior's drink." Whenever my dad drinks prune juice now, he calls it warrior's drink. So I guess sort of
everybody looks at him when he orders it, like, what's the matter with you? Prune juice.
But it's a warrior's drink. So
yeah.
I think it's Klingons. Everything is, this is blood wine. He has to assign some warlike thing to it. So this is the warrior's drink. So anyway, so she kind of sees that spatial anomaly, and she's like, no. So it's like, what is she saying that for? Does she know what that is?
She must.
I'm wondering, and it doesn't look anything like it, but do you think that has to do with that nexus?
That's a good question.
Well, the reason I mention that is because they could come out of that at any time. Mm-hmm. But what does it look like coming out of it? Is that an exit to it? Did the Enterprise C encounter some sort of other doorway to the Nexus somehow and go through the other end?
Well, from what I understand, it was what they did is they created it. The Enterprise C created it with a massive discharge of energy from the Romulan ships and the Enterprise C coming together, and that ripped some kind of a temporal corridor into the future. But
somehow Guinan knew what that was.
Yeah. But maybe she was suspicious that maybe it was the Nexus or something, at the time.
Because when everything changed, Guinan seemed shocked when it happened.
Yeah.
She seemed to recognize what happened in the other timeline, but she's like, this is not quite right. Unless she was totally aware and didn't want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
Because in the end, when they all go back to the way they're supposed to be, after they send Tasha Yar back on the Enterprise C, which is, if I understand it, is a violation of every Starfleet temporal law there is.
Yeah, really.
Which has
especially how it ended up, where she didn't.
Because we ended up in that bizarre Yarza where she allowed herself to have a child with a Romulan, and
that really that turned out. Everything. I mean, I guess you could say from that point on, the timeline was already altered, because we don't really know what would have happened if she didn't go on the Enterprise C.
So that created an alternate timeline by sending Tasha Yar back.
Yeah.
And remember, that's what Picard was trying not to do, because Geordi was saying, I don't know if we were even dead or alive. And that inspired Yar to go and ask Guinan about that. So it's like, why would she want to go back and pollute the timeline even further than it had already been?
Yeah.
But I guess that whole story is just constant time pollution, because the Enterprise C messes it up by coming into the future. Tasha Yar messes their timeline by going back with them. So, I mean, I'm wondering if the Tasha Yar that died on Vega 2 knew anything about the Tasha Yar that was on Romulus.
Yeah.
You got to wonder, her whole timeline is messed up now that I think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of one that we don't really know the consequences of that one yet.
Yeah.
Because
they never really followed up on the Romulan Tasha. They just had that one episode, I think that was the last one, where they brought Spock in, and that was the last we ever seen of her from that point on. They never did anything more with her after that.
So anyway, one of the issues with this next episode is there's a time travel story we never really followed up on. And it's Captain's Holiday. Now, in this case, the time travel story is the B story. Yeah. The main story is Kevin meeting a vacation, meeting Bosch, essentially Indiana Jane, and they go on a little romantic adventure, I guess. But the whole subtext of it is that there are two aliens called Vorgons. Playmates made a figure of one of these aliens, by the way, for some reason. We only appear in one episode, but they are looking for this weapon in the future that can actually blow stars up or something. The Tox Utot. And they're from the 27th century. And apparently Vosh, who should know, considering her history, says out they're actually thieves. But never said they aren't from the 27th century. So, So we have this future thing where people are trying to come back and manipulate events for their own selfish purpose.
Yeah.
So Picard destroys the Utot, but we don't really hear about that Tox Utot thing again. That's kind of like they just kind of let that be a one-episode thing.
Yeah.
But there's still time travel there.
Yeah. But it's more somebody else doing it than...
Well, yeah, except that they're two time-traveling thieves trying to manipulate the past.
Yeah.
Which... well, I was not going to mention it, which kind of leads me to another one. I'm not going to mention it too much because it's actually the same thing in reverse time travel. A Matter of Time. Now, that's complicated because some hood inventor from the 22nd century hijacks a 26th century time pod and takes it to the 24th century, pretending to be from the 26th century.
Wasn't that actor the same guy that played
Max Headroom? That's Max.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
As my father saw that when I was younger, he said, "Why is Max Headroom in this?"
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he used to, he worked for NBC, and he remembered that show being on there. He's like, "Oh, that's Max Headroom." And I'm like, well, I guess so, I said, no, that's Max Headroom. So, and of course...
that was the first time I actually saw him without being that, that thing.
Right. Because he was actually in that CD series, more or less as himself.
Yeah.
But he was in Max Headroom. So, anyway, the thing is that he came on the ship, and he's sort of screwing everything up. He's going around acting really weird.
Yeah, I know.
Random crew members like, "Oh, don't forget to tell them you were there at Penthara 4 and all that." And then he screws up Roy with Troy, who as usual doesn't trust him. But then he makes a dumb remark. He says, "They always said Picard's empath wouldn't trust you." It's like, wouldn't you know my name here from the future? You say that's Picard's empath?
Yeah.
He didn't call Picard Enterprise Captain.
Yeah.
Or, he didn't call Data Enterprise Android.
Yeah.
But he called her Picard's empath. And he's like, "I don't trust you." So he's making all these mistakes and then stealing things. Like, oh, come on. You could have been a little more clever about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have had a micro-replicator and just replicated all the stuff.
And then when he tried to make a pass at the doctor, and she said, "Well, I could be your great-great."
And it's actually the reverse.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyway, the whole thing doesn't work out, and he ends up having to stay in that time. Yeah, and I'm just wondering...
He left a lot of breadcrumbs there to pick up.
Why didn't we see that guy in Enterprise? He could have been from that era.
Yeah, that's true.
They could have been from the 22nd century. They didn't specify when. But, he could have been from that era.
What century did that spaceship come from that he stole?
Well, it was the 26th.
26th. Okay, yeah, I was thinking maybe it was 27th or something like that, but that could have been all part of that temporal Cold War thing.
I was going to mention that. That could have been like an early indicator of that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, but we'll get into Enterprise, because Enterprise is a complex story with that, so.
God, yes.
So, okay, so a Matter of Time, I'm going to put that in there. The next one is a time loop story, but there's a time travel story that kind of happens in the result. Cause and effect. The whole episode is like the scene revisited over.
Same model getting blown up over.
Right. There's a Netflix show that kind of goes into that theory on a more existential level. Now, Russian Doll, have you heard of it?
Yeah.
It's basically about a woman who has a cause and effect, one where she dies and then comes back until she corrects something. And that's kind of what the story is. So basically, the whole thing they have to correct is that Riker has the correct idea, not to destroy the ship, but Data thinks his idea is the correct one, and this other ship comes out.
Everybody naturally thinks Data's idea is going to be the best
right,
one.
and it crashes, and it crashes into the nacelle, like you said, an angle it really shouldn't be doing it in.
Yeah,
It's coming in another weird angle to it, and it just shouldn't have happened. And then it blows up, and then in the end, Data has to program the number 3 into the next thing. So then they figure out, yeah, it's Riker. And then you open up this disproportionate shuttle bay. Have you noticed how disproportionate that shuttle bay is when they open it?
Yeah,
that's a massive shuttle bay. The shuttlecrafts are enormous looking in there.
And why wasn't anything getting blown out of there? I mean, if it was if they were just opening the door up, then stuff should have got blown out of there. There was
there's a shield in front of that, because they do that over there on the
that would have held the atmosphere in. What he wanted was the atmosphere to come out, so that way it would have pushed the ship forward.
Oh, good. That would premeditate the shield, right? So yeah, okay.
Yeah, so all the shuttles should have got.
Maybe those shuttles were fastened to the ground somehow, like
magnets or something. Yeah.
With,
Hopefully there was nobody in there.
I hope not. I hope they cleared the shuttle bay. Oh yeah, maybe they're tied down with stem bolts.
Stem bolts.
They put the stem bolts in there. They're gonna be in the ground. It was stem bolted in there. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, they decompress it, and then we meet this other ship, which is called the Bozeman, commanded by Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah.
This Morgan Bateson, who's in headcanon, he's in novels and kind of a big deal, but
yeah.
And they're like, oh, you're from the 23rd century, you're from the Kirk era, and wearing those big red bulky outfits with the pins on them still. So,
they didn't have Kirstie Alley there in the background, because remember, he had a Vulcan female behind him in the background on that ship.
Yeah, I mean, but
just put Kirstie Alley in there just to, make it all cheers.
Like, oh yeah, they're about Sapphic into the future. Well, and yeah, the Cheers reference. You're right.
Yeah, we just added right to it.
Yeah, maybe put Ted Danson in the corner.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your starship. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, when I saw Kelsey Grammer, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Little Frasier moment here.
And it's funny that he was just on there for just a few moments, and that was it, and it's like, God, you didn't even give him anything, in the show.
Well, they gave him a little dialogue where they told him what year it was from, and because like, okay, now we got to debrief you here, basically. So yeah. I'm like, well, wait, I would have loved to have seen that story too, like what happened with him. Because you brought this guy from the future, and then right off into the sunset. Yeah. I mean, so that's major. You got this, and that's been trapped in a time loop for years.
Yeah, since Star Trek II, I guess the timeline.
Was it about the time of the Genesis and all that?
Yeah, that's it, when they were being chased by a Klingon ship, and they went into that thing that ended up pushing them into the future. In a book that I read, And,
yeah. Okay, so
the next was from that to your era.
The next one up is one of my favorite TMG time travel stories, because it has an interesting little personal arc to it, and it's Time Zero. They discover Data's head in San Francisco in the 19th century. He doesn't know how he gets there. But they end up on this planet called Davidia 2, where there are these kind of vampires that are sort of consuming human souls or whatever, or their energy. And Data ends up in the 19th century. And he meets up with these guys playing cards, and isn't one of them Gul Dukat?
Yeah, that's right. He was.
Mark Alamo.
Different, yeah.
And he's playing poker with them, and then he ends up with a young Jack London, and there's a bellboy. Remember that?
Yep.
And all of a sudden, Data inadvertently encounters historical figures, including Jerry Hardin as Samuel Clemens, and Guinan, who is visiting Earth for some reason.
Yeah.
Adam Guinan.
That really spun everybody's head around there. I was like, whoa, how come she's already there? Nobody ever thought she was there before.
Well, I remember at that time, because of what Mark Wesley made, I always thought Guinan was a person from a planet called Novacron. Remember he mentioned that in Child?
But he said it was a rumor or something. And
but I always assumed she was from Novacron. Nobody mentioned anything about Elorians. So I always just considered, why would this woman from this Novacron planet be going to Earth in the night? And how old is she anyway?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if she's around in the 19th century and still like an adult, well, we know now that they're a long-lived species, but so she's down there playing some sort of version of Ida B. Wells cavorting with all of these historical figures of the day.
Yeah.
Although having Mark Twain kind of looking at the future with skepticism was kind of interesting, you know. Him not going into that future, but not really being fazed by a lot of the technology and kind of thinking, I don't know if this is so good, you know, you've lost certain things. But then Troy explains, well, you know, we got rid of poverty, we got rid of violence, so things aren't so bad.
Yeah.
And he goes back to Earth a lot less cynical.
Yeah.
Again, predestination paradox. Maybe it affected his literature after that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but here's the thing. They left him with knowledge of starships and Picard.
Yeah, really. So it's like, you know, you know.
I mean, hadn't he already implied that he'd already written Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court at that point?
I think so, yeah.
Wouldn't it be interesting if they went back and that inspired him to write that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody would have believed him if he'd actually told them all the things that he saw.
Well, no, knowing Samuel Clemens' character, he still had that 19th century thing about, you know, honor and kind of not always divulging everything. So I doubt he would have gone off and said, I know I mean, he was trying to at first. He was like, there's this crazy guy going around trying to do science experiments, but he's thinking like in contemporary terms about it.
Yeah.
But he finds out there for the future, he's like, yeah, I know I kind of can't do this and I need to live my life. He's kind of smart enough to realize that.
Yeah.
So in other words, Sam Clemens becomes at first kind of a cynic, then a reluctant hero.
Yeah.
But it kind of gives you a good insight into the late 19th century, which I've heard many times referred to as the age of unbelieving, where people were very cynical. The industrial age had come along. You know, people weren't as bound to spirituality. They were kind of thinking more scientifically. And, you know, there was a lot of confusion in society. And, of course, my favorite part, when they're renting out from that woman who keeps calling him Mr. Pickard.
Pickard, yeah.
Mr. Pickard, I'll be having a word with you. You wanted to rent on a Thursday, remember?
Yeah.
I just love his little dialogue. We are in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. We have traveled all over the world. Oh, Milan. I love Picard's little ad-libs in that. They're just so funny.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't she in All Good Things serving Data tea, or was that another person?
I don't know if that was her or not.
She always seemed like that same kind of person who's like, he's like a bloody skunk, you know?
Yeah, on that way, in the
yeah, that gray streak. But no, I just remember Mr. Pickard, because, you know, she's obviously English, so she's pronouncing it in the English way.
That's right, yeah.
Because, you know, if you see it with a K, it's Pickard.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to hear his name pronounced like that. And he's playing right into it and seeing them all dressed up in that 19th century garb and everything. It's kind of a time travel. It's almost like a story that could have worked almost on Sliders, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of had that vibe to it. So
we find out that Data's head is actually, what, 200, 300, 400
right,
years
I was going to mention that. Data walks around for the next 20 years with a 500-year-old head on him. You know? Yeah, they really used head, you know?
Coming out of it when they opened it up, you know, to clean them out.
Probably opened up that little, you didn't see little ants and mites. Where are those from? My head was there in the 19th century. This is a used Android head. So I guess those young androids could survive a while. So
yeah, I guess so.
Yay for Data.
Yeah.
So okay, that worked out pretty well. That was so okay. Basically, we're at the end of the. No, we're not. We're not at the end of TNG. Firstborn. Okay, this is basically starts out as an Alexander story in season 7. Worf is worried that Alexander again doesn't want to be a warrior, and that's worrying Worf because he's Klingon. So he meets up with this other Klingon who's very interested in Alexander's upbringing until he finds out that this other Klingon is Alexander, who came back from the future because his father was killed in the High Council because he couldn't protect him. He'd become a diplomat.
Yeah.
And he wanted to show Alexander how to become a Klingon warrior so he could protect his father from being killed.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time travel story because essentially Alexander kind of went back and changed his own future.
Yeah, that's what he would. Yeah, he wanted to.
So the timeline again, like his Enterprise, was changed from that point on.
Yeah.
Because it was meant to go the other way.
Yeah. Which
meant at some point he might have lost Worf completely, but you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, who knows? That still might have happened, but he thought it wouldn't if Alexander, who did become a warrior, incidentally.
Yeah.
Ironically, to be close to his father. That's a Deep Space Nine story, which is where we're going to go now. Deep Space Nine is a series that I forgot had more time travel stories. And the first one is one of my favorites. And it's eerie because I discussed this with my friend Henrique, and I want to shout out to you, Henrique, because he wants to actually do a blog on this one. It's a episode that actually takes place about 5 years from where we are now. And it's called Past Tense.
Yeah.
They go back in time to San Francisco. I think it was 2024, was it?
Yeah, right around there. Yeah.
Right, and it's basically in a time where, you know, they've taken the mentally ill, the working class, people looking for jobs, you know, uh, people who are kind of just maladjusted in society in general, and they put them into this big kind of ghetto.
It's sort of like all the people that would be on like a social safety net program today. It would be in that ghetto kind of thing,
right?
You know, so it's almost like they got rid of those programs.
And here's the thing about that: it's in San Francisco, and you know, my friend Henrique, of course, is out in that area. And here's a weird thing: he talked recently in Oakland about people who actually are in a condition where they are working and they have jobs, but the rents are so inflated, they leave their jobs and go back out and sleep on the street. So it's literally working homeless. So, and it's kind of a phenomenon, kind of unique out there because of Silicon Valley. And remember, in that episode, they're talking about walls. So, you know, I mean, if you equate that episode with what's happening out in the Bay Area right now and with what's happening with these Trump walls, it's kind of eerie.
Yeah.
Because it kind of replicates where we kind of are right now. That thing about kind of pretending that people who are poor or undesirable just don't exist.
We still have an undercurrent in our society where people think that these welfare programs shouldn't even exist, and that these people should be put in areas like that where they have to take care of themselves.
Right, and that's what that episode was about. And it's eerily interesting that there's so many references to what's actually happening in society now in that.
Yeah.
So that was actually very topical. They were predicting that was done in 90, was it 4?
Yeah, right around there, yeah.
So that was like, you know, they were obviously like 20 years, and now like 5 years away from that. And some of that stuff's actually kind of sort of happened. If I remember, didn't they have like a primitive internet in that or something, or like an internet kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess they did. They called it something else. It wasn't.
I think they called it the net.
Just the net.
I think they just called it the net. Of course, it didn't look like the computers we have now, but. And I was watching it the other day. The guy was actually trying to watch news report, and they wanted him to watch an ad. I'm like, oh my god, that has totally happened. If you watch news story, you're gonna see an ad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that actually kind of predicted some things that have happened. I mean, I'm just glad, of course, people are not in those kind of places, but there are things that they're trying to do that, and you know, that was a very interesting, because it actually anticipated a somewhat real event.
Yeah.
You know, walls trying to shut poor people out of society.
Yeah.
But it also anticipated people resisting it, because that's the whole thing. There's this guy, I think it's the Bell riots, if I remember, and the guy who's supposed to be doing it, Gabriel Bell, he gets killed by accident, so Cisco has to be Gabriel Bell, except when he goes into the future, he's where Gabriel Bell's picture was supposed to be in his So Cisco actually helped create his own future again.
I bet he got a visit from Temporal Investigation.
Right. Gomer and Luxley. Those two. We'll be getting to them in a little bit. So, and remember when Nog and I forget another time travel story that I should have put in, but we'll mention it in a minute.
Oh, the Ferengi there?
Yep, came to my mind. Actually, right after this next one.
Yeah.
Because season 4 had a lot of them. We have The Visitor, which is actually one of my favorite DS9 stories because it's kind of a sweet story. Jake is an old man, played by, was it Kern, Tony Todd there?
Yeah, Tony Todd, yeah.
Yeah, and he's talking about this Anslem book to this young woman and about his father being killed.
Yeah.
And there's a mission on the Defiant where he thinks his father died, and he spent the next years in this timeline that doesn't go well. The Klingons annex Deep Space Nine, and they have to leave it, because it was after that Klingon Kittimar thing. So he ends up on this quest where he doesn't live his life in favor of searching for his dad. And when he finds his dad, Cisco, it's like, why didn't you live your life? Blah, 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 blah. So he says, I've been dragging you through time like an anchor because of something I did.
Yeah.
And he has to return him to the moment of the incident, so the whole thing never happens. So it's an interesting time travel story where, again, Jake, as an older man, kind of sets things right with Cisco, who's being dragged around through time with him.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting metaphor for how some people, you know, they kind of hold on to certain family members. But, you know, Star Trek's really good with that.
You know, the thing about when I watched that for the first time is, you know, this time travel stuff really wasn't the foremost thing in my mind.
It was more a personal story.
Yeah, it was like how Jake was dealing with, you know, his father coming and going as he was growing
older.
that
was the onus. But it was a time, because it's trying to show you this alternate timeline where they had to leave Deep Space Nine and everything.
And it was really sad because, you know, at the end, he finally figures out what the hell he was doing.
Yeah, it's like, it's my fault. I kind of screwed up life for you, so you could just, I dragged you around through time.
He kills himself. So he could reset the timeline back.
Yeah. So when he goes back in time, Cisco's been through this emotional roller coaster because he's only been in that alternate timeline for about collectively 10 minutes.
Yeah, because he kept phasing it out.
But it's like he's kind of upset that Jake in the future killed himself, but he's happy that he's there to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
Because that timeline's not going to go the same way. So it's kind of a very sad alternate timeline because the other timeline was really depressing.
It is, yeah.
Because the only character that seems to go well is Nog.
Yeah.
But you kind of figured Nog was going to go that way anyway, so.
Yeah.
But Jake's life goes.
Remember that little remark that Dr. Bashir was saying, like, oh, two-dimensional systems. How do we ever manage, with two-dimensional, So
in the future, these ships have very advanced stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently.
And of course, the other upside to that is that Jadzia is still alive in that timeline.
Yeah.
Remember, she's kind of older.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting alternate future, where things kind of, go a different kind of way. But anyway, so what ends up happening is that, that ends up being kind of a personal story, but time travel is a very strong component of it.
Yeah.
Because it's an alternate timeline that Jake is responsible for. Things don't go too well, and
that's one of my favorite DS9 episodes.
Yeah, it is too, because it's a good personal story, but it also has an interesting time travel component. So
it really fused the two actors together. I mean, it really brought home the fact that he's a father and then there's a son, and stuff like that.
Yeah, because that element didn't get brought up enough. The fact this guy was a single dad, that kind of didn't get brought up a lot.
Yeah, and
that was a relevant point. So that kind of brought that element back into the Cisco character.
Yeah. It really created a whole bond with that I was glad they.
Yeah, that was a nice character development for Cisco and for Jake too. Not that they didn't have a good thing. I mean, they did a lot of character development with them. Other than that, that was a really good bonding thing for them. Even though most of it didn't happen, it was interesting to see.
It was at least they treated that better than the way they did the Crusher Wesley thing.
Yeah, they
never got the sense that there was ever.
They missed the opportunities with that they could have had.
Yeah.
Where he was kind of a person doing his own thing, and she was just kind of guiding him a little bit. But, maybe he didn't need her as much. I don't know.
Yeah. It just didn't seem as realistic, a family unit as it did with Cisco and his son. It felt more real that way.
Right, because Jake kind of needed his father a little more, where maybe Wesley didn't.
His mother, yeah.
But anyway, the next episode I wanted to mention is Little Green Men. Now, they reference Gabriel Bell a little bit because Nog is learning about the Bell Rise and sees Cisco in that book.
And they bring back the, hey, brother. Remember?
Yes, they bring back I believe the late Charles Napier.
Yeah.
In a role that he's more accustomed to. He's usually playing generals or cops.
Yeah, I know. He's always a tough guy.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, when I first saw him, it was in That Way to Eden. So whenever I see him, when I saw that episode, that's what comes into my head. Stiff man put.
Oh man.
Now, I just think of him. I read that. I really do. But anyway, so they go back to Roswell. Now this is back in the X-Files days, so that's the big alien autopsy, all that. Except the Ferengi go back in time, and they're trying to sell them new technology.
Yeah, in their own weird way.
Napier's like, the more I talk to you, the more you remind me of my brother, who's used car salesman and not a very good one.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a little joke in the end where Nog pretends that they're an alien invading force invading Cleveland. Which is always a punchline in old 40s movies. If you go back, Cleveland's always a joke.
Yeah.
If you go back in time, nothing wrong with you fans in Cleveland out there. I'm just saying the old 40s joke. Like, remember they did that Dixon Hill story where Data's rambling on about the Cleveland Indians, and the guy goes, Cleveland, ha! You got no pictures. Cleveland was always kind of or what was that other one? Gloria from Cleveland.
Oh, from Cleveland.
It's like in the 40s, Cleveland was the ultimate punchline.
Yeah, something about that city.
If you look at old movies from that time, Cleveland was always a joke. So that I guess going back to the 40s, put Cleveland in there. But anyway, so that was kind of and then Odo's there, and
that was funny when he shows up in there. What is a dog?
He's a dog. So then they just kind of brought that Roswell in, like the Ferengi went back in time, and maybe they got some of their technology or whatever, and then they went back to the future, and luckily things hadn't changed much. So maybe they created their own thing. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they unintentionally sparked off the human beings first encounter with a Ferengi.
And then we find out that they wear a thing in their ear as a universal translator. That's
Yeah, because, around that time, you were starting to hear a lot about how come everybody sort of speaks English. And well, they don't.
Yeah.
Number one, the translators and the communicator and the Ferengis have their own, because you hear them speaking Ferengi, I guess.
Yeah.
And of course, the Ferengi, everything's ear-related.
Yeah.
There are erogenous zones on their ear. For some reason, Rom picked his ears with special devices. So they're ear-oriented. And then if you insult their lobes, they're very upset about it.
Yeah, I don't want to do
So
that.
their ears are very important in that culture. Their ears hold some significance. And if you notice, females have smaller ears. So I'm wondering if it's this kind of men on Earth have certain organs they're very happy with, their muscles in every possible way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And maybe the Ferengis are like, oh, my lobes are my masculinity,
Yeah.
Maybe that's just because, they're supposed to be kind of capitalist trolls, which is exactly what they end up being.
Yeah.
But, so they have, so there's one body part they kind of consider to be a big deal, and that's their ears. So their translators would be in there. And he's putting some kind of device in there to change it. And they're like, they're doing some kind of grooming ritual. And he sees him putting that in, and he's like, oh, it's going to be rough,
Oh.
So, you're seeing this. And then they do that thing where they're wiggling their noses around.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were imitating everything they're doing. It's like, look, they're idiots.
And of course, just to show you how different the times are, again, like with any portrayal of the 40s, everybody smokes.
Yeah, I know it.
and then the Ferengis are like, oh, they'll buy poison. They'll buy anything.
Yeah.
Because, everybody smokes. This is the 40s. So that was that again, it was that. And then the Ferengi, remember they insert that little PSA in there? You should take better care of yourself. Stop poisoning your body with tobacco. I just found that kind of cute how they kind of, it's like when you watch Mad Men now, everybody smokes.
Yeah.
It's like that's how everybody did in the past, is be lecherous and smoke all the time. So, obviously they didn't, but that's always how people portray the past. So it's kind of interesting to see that awkward parallel where they kind of almost spoof the past but kind of pay tribute to it.
Yeah.
Again, and that's another thing about Deep Space Nine we discussed, how they constantly pay tribute to old Hollywood of that era.
That's right.
So that kind of went with part of that, because they had that old Hollywood 1940s post-World War II era kind of vibe about it.
Yeah.
And I inserted that in there. And the next one, I'm just going to say this over and over again as much as I can, because this gets me every time. Trials and Tribulations. They didn't per se have to do this, but it's a nice homage.
Yeah, it was an anniversary episode,
Was that 30th anniversary they did that on?
I think so, yeah. I think Voyager did one too with Sulu. So the Deep Space.
Oh, I was going to mention that one, but that wasn't real time travel. That was Mind Meld.
Mind Meld, yeah. But yeah, it was an anniversary one, and it was really, I was right at the time. That was, that was pretty good how they managed to squeeze the old stuff in there with the.
Yeah, because the thing is was that really good CGI or?
Yeah, I mean it was
that was around Twister, so yeah, that would have been when
they recreated a lot of the sets. They had the bridge on the Enterprise and.
Oh yeah, they created the sets, added new people and new outfits, but there were scenes where they actually had the mingling. Like there's that scene in that where they show the line where Kirk's asking who threw the first punch.
Yeah.
And O'Brien fits in there like a glove.
I know it. He looks like he was there all along.
I mean, like I said, you could kind of take a thing and insert that into the original Trouble with Tribbles.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
But if I understand how that works, it's there now.
Yeah.
O'Brien's there now, so
he's canonized in there.
That was canon, so you could actually kind of do it that way.
Yeah. If they ever want to do a remaster of that episode, you could put O'Brien right back in it, because now that's where he was.
But I guess he wasn't that noticeable, so.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and he actually talked to him, and then he said, "No, sir." Remember, he spoke right to him, Kirk.
Yeah, but Kirk wasn't like, "I don't recognize you on the crew roster."
Yeah. Well,
now, you can bet if that was Janeway, he'd have been screwed.
Yeah, I guess they changed crew members so much on the Enterprise at that time.
Yeah, because Janeway would have noticed that and screwed everything.
Well, it was only 150 on the Voyager, so.
Also Janeway, but we'll get into how Janeway screws things up later with time.
Yeah,
because she would have been like, "I don't recognize you." Oh no.
Yeah.
Which actually happened. We'll get into her a little bit later, because she's like the time travel queen, basically. So. She basically beat out Kirk. And so anyway, they go back
on a lot of things.
So they went back in time and they brought back that Arn Darvin character, which is kind of interesting. He stole Nora because he's like, well, I suffered because of Kirk, and I'm going to go back and kill him and ruin the timeline. Actually, you know what?
It seemed kind of like a flimsy kind of plot, Well,
it was a device to get them back there.
Yeah.
Now, didn't they make a new Connie for that? Like a new Connie model for that?
I don't know if that was computer created or if that
looked good, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think they didn't they make a model? I heard they make a model or something for that.
I don't know.
But they had one in the Smithsonian. They couldn't use that, so they had to.
Yeah, maybe they just.
And besides, why would you want that model? You had to stick a hole in the side of it anyway. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, they had and I just want to establish this once and for all.
Yeah.
Once and for all. That episode is solid proof the Connie, as it existed in TOS, is part of the D Space Nine Next Generation canon. End of discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I said it.
That look is there, and it's going to it stays there.
You know what I'm talking about out there.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe watching it right now. It's Thursday night. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had to mention that because that's the end of that discussion. It's there.
Yeah.
And I love how Jadzia was reveling in having the giant bouffant and the
black with the chrome highlight.
And they have Bashir kind of like, oh, well, why are we wearing the different colors?
Yeah.
And Sisko's like, oh, well, they wore yellow for command and red for engineering, and Dax like, women wore less. And she's kind of liking a mini skirt.
Well, yeah, because she lived that period before.
Yeah, she was one of them. Wasn't she Emily at that time, the gymnast?
I don't know. I can't remember how the lineage of that
he's going back there and being honest, like, oh, look at this 23rd century tricorder. Oh, yeah. Spock is way more handsome than I remember him.
He was probably in Starfleet then, too. If she knew all about that stuff, I mean, it seemed like she was probably a member of Starfleet even back then.
Well, I don't know if Emily was part of Starfleet, because she said that Emily met McCoy at some point. It may not have been Emily. Was she Curzon then, or?
No, I think it was Curzon, yeah.
Or Tarius, or... Because, I mean, if we count the Dax symbiotes, here's what I remember. She would have been Tobin during the time of Enterprise. She was probably Leela right now. That was probably her first host was probably right about now in the 21st century. But she was Tobin by that time, by Enterprise. And by the 23rd century, she was either Audrid or Tarius. She might have been Tarius. Wasn't Tarius just before Curzon?
Like I said, I can't remember how the line.
She keeps having to reorder them for some reason because she doesn't always remember. So yeah. I think it was Tarius and Curzon. So it may have been Emily, Audrid, or Tarius.
Yeah.
But she was there.
Yeah.
She was there in some capacity. So she was telling Sisko, oh, I'm sorry. So, but I remember this time. I lived through this time. So it's kind of connecting the TOS universe to the Next Generation era.
Yeah.
Somebody who was alive during that period.
Yeah.
Spock was, but he was doing other things. But,
yeah.
But she was sitting there and kind of looking at somebody, saying, oh, he's more handsome. And Sisko said, oh, Kirk is with the ladies' man. He goes, no, Spock. So, I found that kind of cute that she thinks Spock is sexy, So,
he always got all the fan mail back then,
Yeah, I think that was kind of a nod to how Nimoy was always considered kind of cool, So, he's getting all that fan mail. And, I'm sure there were a few people saying, oh, Vulcans are hot, I mean...
Just like that self-control, I guess. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, and, Dax was kind of playing on some of the fan interest at that time. There was a scene I love in the end where they actually have Sisko tell Kirk that he's happy serving with him.
Yeah. And
they actually have, Uhura looking right at him.
Yeah, I know it.
Who is this man on this ship? I would remember a guy like him, kind of that look.
Yeah. But like I said, at the end, he was like, well, I'm going to be transferring. So it's like crewmen just rotated all the time off of that ship.
So even though he totally altered the timeline there, he kind of didn't.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh, that's generic officer number 23. Thank you.
Officer number 23.
Whatever, that's yellow-shirted guy from wherever. Although Uhura's looking right at him. I found that interesting. They had her kind of looking at him.
Yeah. I think you would remember more your command level staff than you would the red shirts or anything like that, because they're the ones that are always up on the bridge, most of the time. And
so I guess whatever they did, the only way they altered the timeline is they brought at least one Tribble back, and they kind of crowded the promenade with them. I'd love to know how they cleaned. What did they bring? Have Worf get the Glommer in there and just like
the
okay.
Odo sitting there looking at it like he was really amused by it.
I mean, I can see it now. Ding, 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 ding. All of them gone, you know, because those Glommers work fast and they're neat. So
yeah.
I can see him letting a herd of Glommers go in that.
So I know the Tribbles are going to be around for a long, long time.
So, well, and, you know, it's funny in that Worf mentioned there's a Tribble Homeworld. So apparently, you know, and I had this vision at first, this one big giant furball in space. Like a big mother Tribble with all these little ones on top of it. But it actually isn't. It's a planet, and the Tribbles are life forms there. But like they said in the original show, their natural predators keep them from getting too overpopulated.
Yeah.
So they're just a life form that exists on their planet. Probably something like
just food, basically, for the.
Probably something like moss on our planet. You'd see them around plants and stuff, and people would eat them.
Yeah.
Or life forms would eat them. But when they're off their planet in another environment, they thrive too much.
Yeah.
It's like they always say, don't take animals out of their natural habitat because they might breed too much. And
yeah.
You know.
Sort of like in a cycle that they have to stay in.
Yeah, to keep the population down.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? If you transplanted a wildebeest, Africa's entree, out of that country where they weren't a predator, they might overbreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that was kind of the whole lesson of the Tribble. But of course, they filled out the promenade. Quark's covered in them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, so the Tribbles were supposed to be extinct, but not anymore. Unless they took the Tribbles to another home world or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they just had the Glommer take care of them. I don't know.
They just left that door open.
Either way, the Tribbles were gone the next episode. So anyway, so, you know, it was just kind of interesting how the only way they changed the timeline is by bringing Tribbles back. So it was kind of interesting. The next one, I was debating whether to use this because this is one of those theoretically it never even happened things.
Okay.
It's called Children of Time. The Defiant goes into the Gamma Quadrant. They go through this anomaly, and they get hailed by this colony that turns out to be the ancestors of the crew. They'd been sent back in time originally, and they had crash landed there. They knew they couldn't go back to their own time. Because if I understand it, they would have gone back in time to about the 22nd century.
Yeah.
They couldn't take the Defiant back into the middle of NX-01, so you know they had to make do on that planet. So what they do is they have all these descendants of these people, and even these Klingon-type people who live off in the woods, descendants of Worf. Remember the Sons of Moog, they were called?
Yep.
And they're meeting their progenitors and everything. And they claim they have a way to send them back and then send another one back in time to create this all. But in reality, they just want to send them back.
Yeah.
And the wild card is Kira dies.
Yeah.
She can't get back to the station. And the only person who's there who remembers Kira being alive is Odo.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, he splits off, you know, the Defiant, so it doesn't go back in time. And because they decide to go back in time to create this universe so they don't get destroyed. But Odo allows them to go back to Deep Space Nine because he doesn't want to see Kira die again.
Yeah, he sacrificed the entire colony.
Right. So it's a time travel story that kind of has a very interesting character arc where you see how self-sacrificing Odo actually is.
Well, you find out just how much he really does care about Kira. That
yeah, and then Kira has to kind of consider that does Odo in my timeline actually feel that same way?
Yeah.
You know, that he would sacrifice everybody around him for me.
Yeah.
So it's another personal component. It's again a weird reverse time travel story. Predestination paradox. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Because if they don't do that, that colony doesn't get created.
Yeah. And they still remember meeting these people, so it's not like they were really erased from from history.
Right, so they have the trauma of remembering people that no longer happened.
Yeah.
They weren't killed, they just never happened. And then, you know, Kira has to live with the fact that, because if I remember, didn't the other Odo from the alternate timeline link with the other Odo?
Yes. That's how he knew when at the end of the episode when our Odo comes to meet Kira.
Right, because the Odo, wasn't he incapacitated during that time?
Yeah, something happened and he was like stuck in a liquid form or something. He couldn't.
But the other one linked with the other Odo and told him what he'd done.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting sort of story about finding out about Odo's true feelings about Kira.
Yeah.
And I noticed the time travel stories in that 24th century era focused more on character motivations, feelings, things like that.
Yeah, it's only to boost up the fleshing out of the characters.
Rather than time travel being used in another way, which I'll get to in a minute. But last Deep Space Nine one is another similar story, and it's an O'Brien story. Actually, it's sort of an O'Brien Must Suffer story. Again. But instead of Keiko this time, he loses a daughter, which is frightening to think about.
Yeah,
but then, and actually, again, you start to see some appropriate emotions from Keiko instead of her being obnoxious for a change.
Yeah.
She's concerned about her daughter. She's concerned about their family. And then when they find a way to bring her back, but she's been on this planet for a while. She's kind of a feral child. And they're dealing with trying to bring her back, but she wants to go back to Bajor and everything. So they're trying to find a way to bring their daughter back. But they find out in the end they have to send the adult Molly back to live in her world because she can't. Did she murder a Klingon or something in self-defense?
Yeah, somebody, I can't remember now how.
And the other Klingon decided to press charges or something, and so they end up trying to send her back to that time where she meets up with a Molly who just arrived there.
Yeah.
And sends her back just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
So it's another kind of predestination-y thing.
Yeah.
But it's really more about the O'Briens and their position as parents.
Yeah.
And it's kind of good for once to see the O'Briens not being a dysfunctional couple.
Yeah, they were actually working together for the,
Right. I mean, if they'd done that more with other stories, they might have been a functional, likable couple. But most of the time, it was just him suffering because of something she was trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, it started off, they're going on a picnic somewhere. And
right, they're actually acting like a family in this one. So it's nice to see the O'Briens actually being functional for a change.
Yeah.
So maybe they ought to bring the children into it a little more if that helps them, I mean, because of course, in one of them, O'Brien basically almost chastises Molly because he's been in this fictive prison sentence for 30 years. But anyway, but that was consequential, I don't think you normally would have been that way, obviously. But, it was nice to see them actually being a mom and dad and functioning well. So that was a good story to see Keiko not being annoying.
Yeah.
And not being pointless and not being clueless and every other thing she was in Deep Space Nine who wasn't likable. But, and, O'Brien's suffering in this story is actually a more human suffering because he had to deal with, he might not be able to have his child around as he knows her. So it's a good consequential thing. So, okay, now we're up to Voyager. Now, it's going to start off pretty good, then it's going to get weird as we go down. Because this is where time travel begins to get
weird.
But we start off with, I think, the third episode of the show. It's called Time and Again. Now, this is another kind of classic DS9 TNG inconsequential story. They go to this planet where everything has been destroyed. And they find out the planet's been using this very dangerous energy source called polaric energy. But something sends them back in time to when the planet hadn't had that happen to it yet.
Yeah.
They end up being Janeway. I think it was Janeway in Paris, was it?
Yeah.
Was Tuvok there with them?
No, it was just her and Paris, I think, were the only two that went.
Right, because there was this little kid who was being bratty, and Paris was kind of interacting with him.
Yeah, shit. And I don't know, it was something about that kid I didn't like.
He was super arrogant. He's like, "Oh, my dad is this." He's really obnoxious.
Yeah.
And he said, "I heard people. I heard you're somebody who eats little kids." And Paris is like, "Yes, I do eat kids, and I haven't had my lunch yet." And I'm like, "Yeah, that little bratty kid had it coming because he had like some little doctor's kid,
Yeah.
like some little spoiled brat." Like, like everybody says Wesley Crusher is supposed to be, but isn't. Just this really bratty little kid. So, and then basically in the end, he ends up acting like a normal kid because he's actually in danger. He's shooting his mouth off in the beginning. So, and that kid was annoying. You're right. But they're trying to tell them about what's happening, but nobody believes them. Yeah. But I guess in the end, Janeway manages to prevent the explosion from happening and prevent them from. Oh yeah, another point at the beginning of this was that Kes anticipated what happened on that planet.
Yeah, she had some sort of.
Yeah, she came to the bridge and said, "I have to know," and know what, and then wasn't Kes on the away team or something?
Well, I think she was on the ship, but isn't that like the first indication that we got that Kes was kind of evolving into something?
Yeah, and that's weird. Like 3 episodes in, and already we got this idea that Kes is like, well, not a Mary Sue, but kind of this prodigious character.
Yeah.
But so. Yeah, they were kind of cluing her into that because she can kind of, sense the presence of life and death.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like Spock. Remember how Spock knew that everybody on the Defiant? the Vulcan crew.
Yeah, the Valiant, or yeah,
The Valiant. He had this like sudden like reaction. They all died. He's like, like a sudden shock.
Yeah.
And they're like, how could you sense the death of 500 people? And he said, I never understood how humans can feel for the death of one, but feel nothing for the death of 500, which is an interesting point. But the Vulcans could apparently have a great sensitivity to the death of many.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how many,
Because, Vulcans apparently are telepathically connected, I guess.
Yeah.
Not going by current Star Trek rule where the Vulcans are actually Jedi. But anyway.
The Jedi.
Where they're actually super powerful wizard beings.
Yeah.
But, I mean, by the old rules, where Vulcans just have this mysterious connection. Anyway. So, but yeah, so Kes has kind of figured this out. And so, in the end, we kind of cycle back to the beginning of that, and the whole thing never happened, and the planet lives happily ever after, and so does the Voyager crew.
Yeah.
And hopefully that little kid down there is less bratty.
Yeah.
Another timeline.
Yeah.
So that was like
that wasn't one of my favorite time travel.
No, it wasn't, but it's a time travel story. But and it wasn't a bad early Voyager story, but the show would get better as it went on.
Yeah.
We have the time travel episodes.
Yeah.
Well, the next one actually is not that bad, except that it introduces a character that would be presented in a different way a little later. Future's End. The Enterprise gets Voyager. I'm sorry, Voyager. They get an Enterprise here. That's one thing about Voyager. It's the only ship that isn't the Enterprise.
Yeah, I know.
And it's not the Star Trek either. They didn't call the ship the Star Trek in that one. So, sorry, Patrick Stewart. Anyway. Well, you said somebody else you knew thought it was called the Star Trek or something.
Yeah, somebody that wasn't really a fan. They just thought that was the name of it.
Why is it called the Star Trek? So, okay, the Star Trek. I mean, the Voyager, not the Star Trek. The Voyager. They encounter this little time pod with this guy who's trying to prevent a temporal incursion, but they end up being pulled back in time to the 1990s.
Yeah.
And basically, the ship is discovered by Ed Begley. He starts out as kind of this hippie guy, and then he ends up becoming this multi-million-dollar computer chip designer. And it kind of brings to the point that this is yet another predestination paradox. The computer generation we're actually using right now is based off a crude understanding of 29th century technology.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if Braxton was a little more forward-thinking and developed that technology as it was supposed to be?
Yeah.
We could have been in Star Trek in the 1980s.
So apparently that technological revolution wasn't supposed to happen because of the, introduction.
So, yeah, that's another time where the Star Trek history created itself kind of by accident. So it's kind of a weird thing. But the Doctor gets captured. And this episode plays very fast and loose with time because Captain Braxton ends up going back in time to the 60s, aging and becoming just kind of a homeless mental patient. Talking about quasi-Cardassian totalitarians.
Yeah. How they tried to drug him and all that stuff that they did to him.
Right, they thought of him as a mental patient.
Yeah.
So, because obviously he went back to the 60s and, so you knew there was a timeline there. So they kind of fixed it in the end, but the Doctor ends up taking back with him a 29th century mobile emitter and having no problem with that.
Yeah.
No problem that he's basically violated something that I wanted to mention in this. The Temporal Prime Directive. When did they actually implement that? When he mentioned it at the end of this episode, she thought that he could use their technology to take them back home. He said there was a Temporal Prime Directive and they couldn't. And Janeway didn't seem to understand what that meant.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing of it is in Deep Space Nine, we know that there's a temporal, bureau.
So is that just, and then Picard referenced that to that Max Headroom guy, are you using some temporal equivalent of that?
Yeah.
So is that a law that's kind of intertwined into Starfleet at that time, but there's no specific name for it, maybe?
Maybe, I guess. I mean, I don't know how far back it goes, but it should have been around by Voyager. I mean, at least. I mean, it just
because in another episode, we meet Janeway from the early years, and she knows what the Temporal Prime Directive is.
Yeah.
So maybe there is there. They just don't think about it that much.
It's like it's some kind of loose thing they haven't really established.
Well, yeah, I imagine that in the future when time travel is more prominent, that becomes a big deal.
Yeah.
Because Starfleet people. I mean, you can imagine that when time travel came around, it came around when people were really still very ethical.
Yeah.
So, it's despite what he became, I assume Captain Braxton was probably as ethical as Picard or Cisco. That's all.
Yeah.
With time. I mean, with time, but
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a reason why I said that. Okay. So, the next one is, again, it's another kind of visitor story because it's a speculative timeline that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
A future Harry Kim and Chakotay find Voyager frozen in ice, and it turns out their quantum slipstream drive crashes them on a planet where only Chakotay and Kim survive, go back to Earth, and find a way to come back and kind of replay events and to travel through time and do the Survivors Guild. So I believe, isn't it using 7 of 9's Borg technology?
Yeah, she was the key, the linchpin, I guess, to the mission.
Right, and they revive the Doctor.
Yeah.
And then they change the timeline so that doesn't happen. So it's another kind of visitor kind of story.
Yeah, we get to see LaForge's captain of a Galaxy-class starship and Challenger.
Yeah, that makes sense, though, because, you kind of knew Geordi was going to be on one of them ships.
Yeah.
Because, he was one of these guys who would go to Picard and all good things and say, Captain of the Bridge, we have a problem with the phase inducer or some other damn thing,
Yeah.
He kind of loved to say these things, So he loved that Galaxy class.
Yeah.
I'm sure if Captain Scott could have gotten one, he would have loved the Connie.
Yeah.
That was his baby. He loved that ship.
Yeah.
And I think people have ships they have a lock on. Geordi's was the Galaxy class. That was his baby.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sovereign class, I'm sure, that was the most advanced ship, but the Galaxy class is my ship. I know that engine.
That's the first one he was chief engineer. So
and I mean, he could say to Scotty, I don't crash into bulkheads. I know the ship and I don't crash into things. So
it's got to be annoying when the captain of your ship is a former chief engineer and he's always down in engineering.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of see the engineer being like with Jordan with Picard. Sir, please don't touch that.
Yeah.
When Picard's going down there, he's like, oh, please don't touch that. You can imagine, well, I used to be where you are 30 years ago. That would have been an interesting little offshoot to have Captain Geordi.
Yeah.
That still could happen, actually, though.
Yeah.
I could totally see, well, if you look at TOS, we've talked about it, everybody can be captain at some point.
Yeah.
So can you imagine Geordi and Crusher and Riker all kind of being captains? No, they're being captains. Picard being an ambassador, Riker being an admiral by then.
Yeah.
Because you kind of figure Riker would be some big deal, Picard would be an ambassador.
Yeah.
But he's been captain because he goes through the admiral rank like nothing and then goes to ambassador.
Yeah.
Because, that's really his thing is diplomacy. So that's my own little timeline right there.
I just figure he just didn't become an admiral. Picard, he just wanted to be an ambassador, maybe.
Yeah, he probably went straight to ambassador. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
The admiral rank just didn't seem to appeal to him.
Yeah, I can't see him behind us. I can see him out there in the field negotiating alien problems.
Yeah.
So, okay. And now we're going to be back to Captain Braxton and where things get murky.
Yeah.
Relativity.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
this would have helped if they'd have got the original actor.
Yeah, they got another guy to do it.
Yeah,
I think like the original actor.
Because I didn't understand at first because they had a different actor, so I didn't know.
But the original guy was blonde, wasn't he?
Yeah, the other guy was blonde. Yeah, and then they get this other actor. And I'm like,
and younger, and kind of fit, and then they got this other guy who was big and older and darker haired.
Yeah,
didn't look anything like the other guy. When
you're doing time travel stories, you got to kind of keep the same things, otherwise you're going to confuse the audience.
Unless we're supposed to assume that all that time travel altered Captain Braxton's genetic structure.
Still, I was lost at first when I started watching that episode. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah, because we knew Captain Braxton from, and he mentioned things that Captain Braxton would, because Braxton always always taught like Mr. Magoo, those post-industrial totalitarians.
Yeah.
He always used very, very big boy words,
What gave it away was when he was talking about how he was put in a
right, he's stuck in the chain.
Oh, that's the guy. That's the guy.
That episode gets so confusing. Because first of all, 7 of 9 is in Voyager's past trying to find a temporal weapon. Then she dies. Then they pluck her out of the present Voyager time and have the whole cycle start all over again. And then she dies, and then it's repeat. And again, we're like in a temporal loop here. So basically, in the 29th century, they're saying that, oh, well, if we do this too much, you'll develop some kind of temporal narcosis and you'll die. So anyway, so basically, when she goes back in time at one point, unlike Kirk with O'Brien, Janeway is very aware that she's there and starts probing and asking questions. And that's where Janeway being a scientist might be a problem with the timeline.
Yeah.
Because, maybe that was the thing with Kirk, too. He wasn't a scientist, per se. So he wasn't thinking, I don't recognize this man in the red shirt. Who is he? What's his name? Where Janeway was like, oh, I don't know you. What's your name? Who are you? She's kind of sabotaging the mission. So then in the end, they find out that Captain Braxton placed it there because he had temporal psychosis from what Janeway did to him, whatever. And I guess that included a complete physical makeover.
Yeah.
So they changed, they did change the actor, like you said. I never usually think about that, but I was like, yeah, they changed him. So maybe they figured, oh, nobody will ever notice the difference. It's just Star Trek. Yeah, well, we do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you want to confuse your audience, yeah.
I mean, even though it's a fantasy sitcom, people knew when they changed Dick York to Dick Sargent on Bewitched. They knew.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't fool people. They just knew. But, she's a witch, so make him any way you want, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the thing with Bewitched. The nose did it.
Yeah.
That was an easy thing.
She got tired of the old look. Wanted to change him into a different look.
All done. Or maybe Endor got a little mad at him one day. I'll change you another Darren. Anyway, okay, out of Bewitched here. But anyway, the cool thing is that, and there's a funny element to this because Janeway, who's a scientist, is trying to figure out this weird element of time travel in the end. Because they capture Captain Braxton and think, okay, it's all over. We can get out of here.
Yeah.
They say, oh no, there's 5 more like him in the brig. I'm like, oh, goodness. What? Why do we have to reintegrate him? He's like, stop, please.
Yeah.
Janeway's like, yeah, and I feel like, yeah, Janeway, you and everybody else in the audience here.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the point so far that he planted a weapon in the past, but 5 of them in the brig?
Yeah.
5, 7 of 9s in sickbay?
It's almost like, what do you got to do? Capture the same guy in every universe?
I hate to say this. The time travel rules in that are very similar to a horror trope I'm sure you've heard. You got to kill the head vampire.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, you say, oh, it's not enough to kill them all. You got to kill the head vampire, and then they all go with him. That's kind of you got to get the head Braxton, and then all the rest of them will come down. So it's like that was the head Braxton they got. So Jimmy's like, I better go back in time before my eyes cross here. So
I can't imagine what it must have been like to write the script for that episode because I'd have been pulling my hair out, trying to.
I hate to say this. I think they actually cut out a few little elements they should have put in.
Yeah.
I think there was some missing links in that because why would they need to have 5 of the same guy in the freaking? That was just, I don't even know what that was.
Yeah.
Again, it was kind of, you got to kill the head vampire, Yeah. Okay. So, boy, we touched on this one when we did our Women of Star Trek one, but I really don't want to, it is a time travel one, so I have to discuss it. That's Fury.
Oh, yeah. That really wasn't a very good time travel thing.
It wasn't even a good episode at all, and it was terrible for Cass. But okay, so we have nasty, bitter, cynical Cass for some reason, back in her first season wig for some reason, if you notice. They just made it all up. Coming on the ship, blowing everything up. I hate Janeway. Life is terrible for me. I'm no longer your innocent little girl. I'm trying to kill you off because myself got messed up in the future. Woe is me. She turned from being basically this well-adjusted character to being this angry emo character.
Yeah.
Was like, oh, no, you get rid of her, then you brought her back to be an evil witch. Why did you do that? So anyway, she goes back in time, disguises herself as her younger self, and tries to, but still has problems with remembering how happy her past was. So then all she has to do in the end is kind of remind her younger self to make a holographic message. But
Isn't
still,
in a way, kind of a replay of Where No Man Has Gone Before, where Gary Mitchell kind of, gets all these powers, and then he's kind of like he doesn't remember what he was before, and when he kind of comes back, he's like Jim. It's like he doesn't.
You mentioned that. It's like Gary Mitchell may not have remembered what he did when he had those powers when he didn't have them anymore.
That's right.
So they're like two different.
Back, like really super powered and everything, and she's angry, just like Gary Mitchell was. Going.
Right, except it was actually her. So then the young Kes tells her to remember who she was. Now, here's the weird thing about that episode. She went back and actually changed time. Mm-hmm. So at first when she sees Kes and she wants to come on the ship, Janeway's like, oh, Kes, where did she come from? But the second time, she's like, oh, activate the hologram.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's my thing. If she went back in time and did that, why didn't Janeway prevent Kes from leaving Voyager in the first place?
Yeah.
But that would have changed the course of Voyager, wouldn't it?
Well, I guess it would either that or it would have destroyed the ship because remember she couldn't control her power when she was forced off the ship. Remember when they were trying to get her to the shuttle and she was too
Yeah, good point. So Janeway probably realized she had to let her leave anyway, but
yeah, there was really no
came back, she's like, okay, activate hologram. So Kes basically changed her own timeline. So then at the end, she sees herself, and all of a sudden, she has a Grinch moment, you know, where she's like, I realized Christmas was a little bit more, and she's like, So she goes down, and she's like saying goodbye to Neelix, and she's still kind of downtrodden. But I'm like, I'd love to see what happened to Kes after that, how she spent her last few years of life, if she was able to live well in Ocampa and adjust back to herself and be reoriented.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a really poor ending for her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I think it was a slap in the face to a character that I would have loved to have seen grown and developed.
Yeah.
But
I mean, she could have developed powers where she could have extended her life indefinitely, you know, been like a Q or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these omnipotent characters you don't really see again, like that Amanda from TNG.
Yeah.
She's a Q and she just rides off into the sunset, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Very interesting character we only see for an hour and that's it, you know. But, you know, that's why, I mean, recurring characters, if they're interesting, can be good. I mean, so sometimes I think they underuse them. Okay, now we're going to go into another one where, all right, so this is an episode called Shattered, and it's Voyager did this a couple of times where the Voyager gets separated into all these parts.
Oh,
remember they did it in kind of a horror way in the second season, was it, where the ship got twisted and they were and the ship was all screwed up.
Bring the unmentionable back there.
Well, we're gonna get to her in a minute because I got a little go with that. Yeah, okay. So anyway, here's the thing. I remember watching that, and if you remember, in sickbay, it was before the Doctor had the mobile emitter.
Yeah.
But in another section of the ship, it was a post-Janeway universe where Naomi Wildman and Icheb were older.
Yeah.
We're getting to that Icheb point. But then in engineering, yep, that's when I was almost ready. He's like, oh, no, not her again. Like, go away, Seska. And then, of course, here's the kicker. She's like, I'm going to bring it all into a line with my time. And I'm like,
Yeah. You know, that was funny because I felt
the Seska show.
Like, oh, this is going to be a good episode. Then it goes to engineering like, oh, come on.
Right. That's like play that music from,
right.
Like, yep, that's
like,
the
yeah. Like, oh, no, it's really not going to be that good.
And even she goes like, oh, no, it's her again. Like, they just, and it's like, people are almost like, this is a character you want to see again. We don't want to see her again.
Yeah, who was saying that?
It's been 2 years getting rid of her. You know? So I'm like, couldn't they have something better happening in engineering, like something else? I mean, maybe they could have had that be the day they activated the quantum slipstream drive or something.
Yeah, anything but that. I mean, just...
you know, rather than when I saw them, like, don't want to stop the recording now. Yeah. I was afraid, like, this is going to turn into the Seska show from this point on. She's going to take over the ship and whatever. So I'm like, oh, please don't do that. You know, it's like, why did you bring that timeline back?
Yeah.
Of all the timelines. So that's, you're right. That's when I was like, yep, wouldn't blame you, Andre.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, it was getting good, and then all of a sudden we see that Seska's back. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I know, this is where Seska hating, but really. I mean, I don't see any Seska fan clubs.
No.
I mean, they actually wrote her out of Voyager to make the show better. They didn't need to get rid of Kes. Just get rid of Seska, problem solved.
Well, that whole Kazon storyline was just...
that Kazon storyline was just like a dumb, low-budget Klingon story, and just...
It never ended. I mean, it's like, how much further do they have to go to get away from these people? It's like...
another quadrant encountering new aliens instead of the same old ones every week.
Yeah. I mean, crap, they were following them like they were, you know, everybody's best thing. You know, it's like, God.
Yeah, like, oh, you destroyed the character. Take her. We got to send every Kazon sect after you.
Yeah.
And then this obnoxious one, Seska over here, who's canoodling with one of ours. So, you know, it all got to be a big soap opera on her part. And I was like, oh, please don't let her reset the timeline so she's in charge of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Picard telling Q, I can't believe you're in charge of the afterlife. The universe isn't that badly designed. You know, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, don't let the universe be badly designed to be controlled by Seska.
Yeah, God.
Really, I mean, I don't want her in charge of Voyager's future. She'd probably blow the ship up using bottle rockets.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, okay, that's it for Voyager, and it was a good time travel story, sort of, for the most part, except that she's in it. You know, so, yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. I've heard people talk about, we don't like Wesley, I see good aspects to him. We don't like Kes, I see good aspects to her. I hear people skip right over Seska.
Yeah.
No one mentions her. That's how wasteful that character actually was.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't seen Martha Hackett in a lot of other things. I mean, I don't know if she's plays that character every time, but honestly, that should have been over quick.
Yeah.
That just got old. So now we're going to get into Enterprise, and I was going to talk about different episodes of this.
There was one more episode of Voyager, the last episode, which they
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Endgame. That's not a Q-related thing. You're right about Endgame.
Old Janeway.
Okay, you're right. I forget Endgame. I should have remembered Endgame. Basically, that was a whole future where Voyager went back, but in 27 years, but things didn't work out quite right.
Yeah.
7 of 9 did not survive. Chakotay came back and died shortly thereafter. And Janeway had regrets. So she got involved with the Klingons and this shuttlecraft and went back in time with Borg technology in order to facilitate this with the help of Captain Harry Kim.
Yeah.
Who, well, at least it's good to see that he had another rank.
Finally.
You know, because, I mean, he spent years as being an ensign on that ship.
I know it.
I mean, they demoted and re-promoted Tom Paris twice before he even got in. I mean, I almost think that he went back in time and said, you know, you've been an ensign till you were like 50, so let's get pips on you, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you can almost see him coming back and having gray hair. Like, you're still an ensign with gray hair?
Ensign. The oldest ensign in Star Trek.
I can see him coming back still an ensign on that ship.
God.
I always thought that was kind of symbolic of him being a young guy and Janeway kind of infantilizing him.
Yeah.
Because he even mentioned that, like, you're trying to keep me young and the whole deal. And it's like, yeah, you're not young anymore. Here's some pips. Come on. You know, command a ship. Really. You know, I mean, could you imagine if Riker stayed a lieutenant for like 35 years? You know? So Kim got a better deal from that. But anyway, Janeway went back in time, and here's a confusing part of that episode. And I don't know how far that was after the Voyager before it. All of a sudden, Chakotay and 7 of 9 are an item for some reason. Out of the blue. We'd only see them as a holodeck item, but not the real Chakotay in her.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, wait a minute, how far is this after the last Voyager we just saw?
That's right, yeah.
What happened? Was this like 2 years later or something?
2 years later.
What is it? We like jump to season 9 here? I mean, is there a relationship we didn't see develop?
Yeah.
Although we can't be too far because Nealon's just left a couple episodes ago and Naomi's still talking to him on Subspace.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe, I don't know how far that could go. I guess whatever. You know, they could develop a relationship in 5 seconds. Maybe some weekend we didn't see the show, something happened. I missed the boat on when that coupling happened.
I don't even know if anybody even wrote a book to even kind of fill in that gap somewhere.
Yeah, because when Chakotay goes into the cargo bay and she's putting this picnic up, and I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah.
Why are they all of a sudden a thing?
Yeah.
I mean, she chose a holodeck version of him as her kind of test.
Yeah, like a prototype boyfriend.
Right, but it wasn't really him.
Yeah.
So why all of a sudden is her and the real one involved?
Yeah.
Did I miss the second date? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, how'd that ever come to
That's a weird part of the episode. So then Janeway comes back and she's giving her all this technology that can allow her to use a Borg transwarp hub to get home, which they do. But here's a question I think a lot of Star Trek fans have, including myself. Was that episode the end of the Borg?
That's what I keep wondering.
Because they killed another Borg queen in Star Trek First Contact. Wasn't the end of the Borg.
Yeah.
They kind of damaged the collective irreparably in Unimatrix 1. Still not the end of the Borg.
Yeah. And
they blew up the Borg central plexus in Endgame. The end? Limbo? Purgatory? What happened, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that really ended the Borg. I think somehow it still thrives.
Yeah, the Borg seem like they operate on Marvel rules, where it's like superhero death. We can't really kill them off.
It's like they're so advanced that maybe they're, the Queen kind of exists in some kind of different metaphysical form, and it just floats around, and whatever thing is out there, like you can't really kill the Queen because the Queen is here, she's there, she's everywhere, she's. Well,
one thing that I think, again, my friend Henrique mentioned is that he wants to describe the Borg as more like a natural condition in the universe you can't quite get rid of.
Yeah, that sounds close.
Maybe the Borg are more like an insect. Like they're a part of the universe that exists for a very specific reason, and they can't really be gotten rid of that easy.
Yeah.
Like you may be able to take off bits and parts, and even but they can, because they're so adaptive, they can. I mean, I can say this: Janeway probably found ways to defend against the Borg quite a bit.
I mean, are the Borg in connection with other Borg from other time periods or other universes? I mean,
well, we don't know. I mean, in present day Star Trek, that's kind of something that's kind of being toyed with. So I don't really know what the deal with these.
We know about all those quantum realities that Worf went through there, and
right. So I mean, well, the Borg exist in those, so I don't know if the Borg are assimilating Borg from other quantum realities. That's why they wanted to keep that 29th century drone away from the Borg collective, because that would have made the Borg instantly more advanced.
Exactly.
And you know, it's a weird thing, and you know, because we haven't really explored if that was the end of the Borg. We never heard of the Borg yet after that.
Yeah.
So we assume that maybe she dealt a blow enough to the Borg where it would take them a while to come back. At any rate.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she dealt a big blow to them. I don't think that was like. It may not have been the end, but I think that was a big, significant blow.
Yeah.
So I think the ending of that, the Borg might exist in some fashion, but they're not undefeatable.
Yeah.
I think Borg are not an undefeatable element. I think they can still maybe assimilate, or they're still out there doing that, but I think they're not formidable anymore. I think the Borg have lost their formidability. And that was an issue I heard mentioned about Janeway a lot, that she kind of made the Borg a little bit too easily defeatable.
Yeah, because it seemed like the threat, the whole concept of this great big disaster that the Borg could bring kind of got chipped away over the years, where they weren't so indefeatable, you know, or undefeatable anymore, that they were finding new ways to best the Borg and all that. And it's like, well, now they're not such a threat anymore now, because now the people can deal with it, you know.
Yeah,
like,
I've often heard Janeway described as domesticating the Borg.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, because she bought 7 of 9 on board, and even Q flat out said, "Look how you housebroke that Borg drone." You know, but you know, and it's true. You know, Janeway kind of domesticated the Borg, and she kind of had the Queen under her thumb a little bit, and that's what happened in this universe. The old Janeway came back, and she basically owned the Borg Queen.
Yeah,
like totally owned her. So you got to wonder, in her other timeline, what was her connection to the Borg Queen in that universe? I mean, how much? Because remember they were teaching about the Borg in Starfleet.
Yeah,
that they kind of knew more about them.
Yeah,
my impression
the time in the
so my impression is the Borg were present in that timeline, but no more threat than the Klingons would be.
Yeah,
you know, kind of like they were defeatable by the Federation. They weren't, you know, they could come around and cause problems, but you know, they weren't as dangerous as they once were.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there was that, because we haven't really completed the end result of that. Voyager went back with technology from a speculative future with a 29th century mobile emitter, and we never heard about what happened after that.
Yeah.
I guess Star Trek Destiny can explain some of that. I hope.
I don't know.
I hope. I don't know what that's going to be, but I'm hoping it kind of delves into that a little bit and doesn't just leave us hanging. Because I like to see the post-Voyager. I mean, even in Nemesis, they didn't really explain how much the Voyager's return impacted things. It should have impacted things big.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see them taking that mobile emitter, throwing it in the Voyager and saying, well, it's got all the technology, throw it in and forget about it. You know?
I would guess that if by that time, if the Starfleet had this temporal prime directive in play and they had a whole organization that's supposed to protect time, they probably would have taken Voyager and put it someplace where, you know, like some secret place where people couldn't actually reverse engineer what she brought back, you know, with her from, you know, from the future Janeway, so that way it wouldn't alter the timeline, you know. But you know, the thing is, though, if you already got the stuff and it, you know, and it was good, why wouldn't you use it? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's already been done. It's already there. So I mean, it's like what happened with Enterprise when you had Daniels come back and he had all that stuff. Eventually, he had to use it in order to.
All right, I guess we're gonna have to get into that story now.
Yeah.
And the reason I mentioned that is I was gonna pick out individual time travel episodes in that, but that got to a point where time travel wasn't an element in episodes. It was actually an arc throughout the series.
Yeah, which got boring real fast.
Yeah, and it was basically, now, we're in the 22nd century. We have an opportunity to build a pre-Federation universe where the Federation's happening. I call it Federation building. And we can just do a thing about Enterprise on its own. I still want to do that, but this could be an element of it too. But instead, it became about a temporal Cold War with people from the future.
Yeah.
And then they brought in Xindi, who were being manipulated by people from the future.
Yes.
And we had Daniels, who was masquerading as a Starfleet officer, but from the future. So basically the 22nd century is a front of this Cold War, and everybody in all these different times want to pollute that time.
It's like, who is on the ship who isn't from the future? You know?
Right. And of course, the joke is that who was the captain? Scott Bakula.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's Al? You know, is he gonna come out of some room with Wah!
That should have been a red flag right there. That this Star Trek is going to be all about quantum leap.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they had a really stupid theme, but I mean, at the beginning of Enterprise, they should have had D D D D D.
It would have been a better theme, I think. And then
yeah, but I mean, just like this is like Star Trek Quantum Leap, you know, because they were typecasting Scott Bakula, so it's like, okay, we don't want to typecast Scott Bakula. What do you do in this new series? Put in time travel.
Yeah,
have Scott Bakula doing time travel. You've seen this show somewhere before, haven't you? It was called Quantum Leap, you know. So,
Star Trek Quantum Leap.
Right. So, I mean, I guess kind of like, yeah, here you are typecasting me again. You got to put me in this time travel show, and I mean, I saw that element of it. Yeah. And who's interacting with Daniels? Scott Bakula.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, and when they screw up the timeline where the Nazis take over, who sent back in time? Scott Bakula. So he's basically the catalyst for all this time travel.
Yeah.
This Captain Archer figure. And this is saying, well, you know what? This is happening, but don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so I'm finding about all this future technology, about these Enterprise J's I know nothing about. The Xindi are going to be part of this Federation, but I got to go back and pretend it all never happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I figured out Captain Archer's life must have been a terrible mess. He had to spend the rest of his life keeping this deep, dark secret.
Sort of like what happened with Cochrane when he found out about the Enterprise E and all that what was going to come after his...
Yeah, I mean, these guys must have been made of lead. I mean, geez, you know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess they had some scruples if they're going to keep all this information.
Yeah.
You know. Unless Ephraim Cochrane became a senile old man and said, you know, I got this little story to tell all you about this Captain Picard guy, you know, I mean.
Well, remember he said that he was talking about something during a speech and they thought he was drunk or something like that. He was talking about the Borg, remember, in a speech that Archer was playing back in his ready room. You know, he's playing the speech back and then he said...
Yeah, and, you know, another thing the Enterprise kind of did is it kind of mentioned how the Borg that crashed on Earth,
yeah,
were buried up in the polar ice caps or whatever.
Yeah.
That had consequences in the 22nd century.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes I wonder if some of the reason why Star Trek is the way it is today is because the Enterprise era messed up the timeline so bad.
Yeah.
Because they were always manipulating things and messing things up. And
yeah. I mean, you don't know how much of the integrity of the original timeline is left.
Which leads me to today, and I know this is a trope we always do in our blog. We're talking about time travel here and alternate timelines possibly in the future, doing a blog on that. Now, Star Trek itself is basically one alternate timeline unexplained after another.
Yeah.
So basically, ever since Enterprise, it's like Back to the Future. Here's where it's skewed off into that alternate 1985. So now we're skewed off into all these little... skewed off. I mean, if you look at Star Trek, it's like, here's Star Trek, and then now it's...
Yeah, I mean, how can you actually write a book, a chronology of Star Trek when it's split off?
Try writing a sort of chronology now.
Yeah, really.
It would be like the Star Trek multiverse chronology doohickey, you know? I mean,
like how many volumes? You know, one volume for this universe.
Here's sort of chronology for Prime. Here's sort of chronology for the Kelvin universe. Here's sort of chronology for Discover, whatever that is. So
yeah, you know, God Almighty.
You know, and then maybe we can fit Axon into canon a little bit, but I don't know. You know, there could be all these different like weird. Or the universe where Troy are married for some reason. So, you know.
I mean, we're turning Star Trek into Doctor Who here because we can't...
Exactly. We're in time and space all the time.
Yeah.
So, like you said, they should just call it Time Trek at this point.
Yeah.
Enterprise should have been called Time Trek.
Yeah.
But, you know, they have faith of the heart. And they're not going to hold them down no more. No, they're not going to change their mind because they've got faith of the heart. I had to throw that in there. Sorry, Russell Warren.
Yeah.
Okay, so before my Hayes cross, should we cut this time travel thing off before it gets absurd? Because we've done the Voyager thing where they have 5 Captain Bracks, and we've gone into Enterprise and everything. I wish the Enterprise had more Federation building, but no, we had to have time travel all over because Scott Bakula, you know.
Yeah.
And I loved him in that show, but geez, don't make it into Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
Which they kind of did. You know, utilize his talents in another way.
Didn't you say originally they weren't going to do so many time travel?
Yeah, I was reading one of my Eagle Moss books, which are very useful to a lot of things, that the original approach of Enterprise was that they were going to go with a more TOS-y vibe.
Yeah.
And that they were going to have a much more lighthearted show. But when 9/11 happened, they decided for some reason, well, 9/11 happened. How do we reflect that? Time travel. Endless time travel.
Okay.
So, I guess there was this thing where people regretted what happened. They wanted to change the past. So we'll do it in Enterprise. We'll have them change the past all the time.
Well, the one word that kept coming up during 9/11 was surreal. And that kind of implies people felt like they were living in an alternate.
Right, and people would often say they wish they'd gone back in time and, like, where did this happen? When, how could this have been? When were we not paying attention? I wish we could go back in time and change it. So I think Enterprise, because the Suliban were very much an analogy of the Al-Qaeda, if you look at it.
Yeah.
So, rather than dealing with political issues, they're dealing with temporal political issues.
Yeah.
Fighting this very, 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 I should say, very undefined temporal Cold War.
Yeah.
And usually a Cold War is just people who are kind of not speaking to each other.
Yeah.
But if you ask me, this temporal Cold War gets very hot very quickly.
Yeah. Because all of a sudden you start seeing other races getting involved in this thing. First, we just thought it was the Suliban, but then we find out it was all these other aliens that were involved in this thing too. So it's like a great big giant chaos, in the timeline here that's going to happen sometime in the 29th century,
So yeah, by that point it just isn't, it's a bit of a mess. So yeah, I think, boy, I think we've gone on a while, but time travel in Star Trek has been used since the beginning, often used very well, but then by the time it got into the 2000s, it just got super murky and kind of became what it's about.
Yeah.
It
was more focused on the actual time travel.
It was one episode at a time they were doing it.
Yeah, but they weren't really developing characters with it like they did with TNG.
I mean, could you imagine if time travel was a key component of TNG? Every episode would have been like parallels. There would have been like a different universe every week.
Yeah.
And they could have just called it Time Trek, like you said. So time travel started off in Star Trek as a good concept for storytelling and for messages and for character arcs. And then all of a sudden it turned into an easy writing device to the point where, you could say Q did this, Q did that. Now, the Wizard did it in Star Trek is time travel.
Yeah.
That fixes everything somehow, and it doesn't. So, a little message to current Star Trek, explore strange new worlds in space.
Yeah.
Stay out of time travel for a little bit. It would really help out. So, Anyway, on to next week, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Wherever that comes from, because sometimes, one of us doesn't have an idea, the other does. So we'll pick something next week. One of us, both of us, the other. So anyway, until next week, live long and prosper. And if you can, stay in your own time.